World War II's most elusive enigmas, a story with no ending, a chapter left unwritten. And it leaves us wondering, what secrets might still lie beneath the mountains, sealed in darkness, untouched since the war? And if one day they are uncovered, will we be ready for what they reveal? From the hushed forests of Silesia, where rumors of a hidden Nazi train still echo through the soil, we shift now to a much darker corridor of history, a space deep underground beneath the crumbling heart of a defeated empire. Berlin, April 1945. The once proud capital of the Third Reich lay in ruins. Soviet artillery thundered relentlessly across the skyline, and smoke twisted through the broken city like a funeral veil. Beneath the shattered streets, in a fortified bunker hidden 16 ft below the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler, architect of genocide and war, awaited the end. This was the Führer bunker, a narrow, claustrophobic maze of dimly lit rooms reinforced by thick concrete walls. Cold, silent, and far removed from the world above. It was here that Hitler is believed to have taken his own life on April 30th. A single gunshot, a body burned in haste, and with it, the collapse of a regime. That is the official version, but questions have lingered ever since. The Soviets were the first to reach the bunker. They claimed to have recovered Hitler's remains along with those of Eva Braun, partially charred in a shallow crater near the garden entrance. But the evidence they presented was incomplete and strangely inconsistent. The bodies, they said, were too damaged for proper identification. No conclusive autopsy, no public photographs, no universally accepted proof. Instead, a veil of secrecy descended. For decades, the Soviet Union tightly controlled all access to the supposed remains. A piece of skull, they claimed, was preserved, a fragment bearing a bullet hole. But in 2009, modern forensic testing on that very fragment revealed something unexpected. It belonged not to a man, but to a woman under 40. Suddenly, one of the few physical proofs of Hitler's death became another question mark. So what really happened in that bunker? Could the man who orchestrated the greatest war in modern history have escaped? Some believe the chaos of Berlin's final days created the perfect cover amid firebombs, mass suicides, and fleeing officials. It would have been easy, some argue, for a well-prepared double to be sacrificed in Hitler's place while the real Führer slipped away unnoticed. If so, where would he have gone? The most persistent theories point to South America, Argentina in particular, a country known to have harbored high-ranking Nazi fugitives after the war. Men like Adolf Eichmann and Isef Mengele were confirmed to have lived there for years, sheltered by sympathetic regimes and secretive networks. Could Hitler have done the same? Witness testimonies collected over decades described sightings of an older man resembling Hitler in various towns across Argentina and Chile. Some claim he lived in a remote compound in the Patagonian wilderness, guarded and hidden among former SS loyalists. Others speak of a secluded estate near Barlow, nestled beside a pristine lake, eerily quiet and curiously fortified. Declassified FBI documents add fuel to the fire. Pages of reports from 1945 and beyond include tip-offs, intercepted communications, and field investigations that, while unconfirmed, reflect an astonishing level of uncertainty within American intelligence. Some documents even reference German submarines landing on Argentine shores weeks after the war's end. Was it all misinformation, post-war paranoia, or did someone somewhere know more than they were willing to say? Then there are the skeptics, those who argue convincingly that Hitler's escape would have required a level of coordination and secrecy beyond the crumbling Reich's capabilities, that the testimony of those present in the bunker, however contradictory in parts, largely supports the suicide narrative. That escape was not only implausible, it was unnecessary for a man already cornered, broken, and facing absolute defeat. And yet the mystery endures because too many threads remain loose. Too many facts blurred by secrecy and time. The Soviets had every reason to withhold or distort information during the Cold War, fueling uncertainty on purpose. Western agencies, reluctant to confirm or deny too much, allowed conspiracy to flourish in the vacuum. Today, the rebuilt city of Berlin stands silent over the old bunker site. There is no marker, no monument, just a quiet parking lot bordered by trees. Below it, the reinforced corridors where the Third Reich came to an end lie sealed and forgotten. But the question remains open. Was this truly the place where Hitler died, or simply the last place he was seen? As the years pass and new documents emerge from the shadows, we are left to wonder if the most infamous figure of the 20th century could disappear without a trace. What else might still lie hidden in the fog of war? As the dust settles over the final days of the Reich and the rumors of Hitler's fate fade into shadow, we turn now to something far stranger. Not a person, not a place, but a machine, if it ever existed. In the dense pine-covered hills of Lower Silesia, near the present-day Czech border, a strange structure stands hidden among the trees. Weathered by time, overgrown with moss and eerily out of place, it resembles a concrete cooling tower, or perhaps the base of a heavy industrial crane. But it has no known purpose. Locals call it the henge, a circular framework of reinforced pillars standing like silent monoliths beneath the sky. It is here, according to post-war accounts and classified testimonies, that a secret experiment may have taken place. An experiment with a code name whispered only in fringe corners of World War II lore. DLO, the bell. Descriptions vary. Some say it was roughly 9 ft tall, metallic, shaped like a large bell, and surrounded by thick power cables. Others describe glowing blue or violet light, strange radiation burns, and a pulsing hum that caused nausea, hallucinations, and even death in those who stood too close. But what was Glock? The story begins, at least in the public record, with a Polish journalist and intelligence officer named Igor Witkowski, who in the early 2000s claimed to have uncovered classified documents and transcripts from a post-war SS interrogation. In those documents, a high-ranking officer named Jakob Sporenberg described a secret Nazi project conducted in a facility known only as Derisa, the Giant. This vast underground complex, still partially unexplored, was carved into the Owl Mountains and may have been the nerve center for experimental weapons and classified technology. Witkowski's account described D Glock as a top-secret energy device powered by a mysterious red liquid, code-named Zerum 525. The machine reportedly spun at high speeds within a chamber lined with lead bricks. Test subjects exposed to it allegedly suffered horrific effects: molecular disintegration, nervous system failure, and time perception disturbances, but the nature of the bell remains elusive. Was it a prototype for a new kind of propulsion? A failed reactor, a particle accelerator, or as some more speculative theories suggest, an experiment in anti-gravity, time manipulation, or even interdimensional travel? The Allies knew the Nazis were exploring advanced science. At the end of the war, Operation Paperclip saw American forces race to capture German scientists and research long before the Soviets arrived. Among the men taken was Vera von Braun, who would later help design the Saturn V rocket. But what else did Allied intelligence discover, if anything, about DLO? To this day, no official documentation from the Third Reich confirms the bell's existence. No blueprints, no photographs, no surviving engineers. All we have are second-hand testimonies, local folklore, and a growing number of declassified intelligence files from various post-war investigations, each offering glimpses but never full clarity. And then there's the henge. Some dismiss it as a base for a cooling tower or an unfinished industrial platform, but others see in its design something more deliberate. Perhaps a testing rig meant to tether something heavy and unstable. Could Die Glock have hovered here, suspended in that concrete ring, while scientists watched from a safe distance behind lead-lined walls? The deeper you go into the story, the stranger it becomes. There are claims impossible to verify linking Glock to Nazi occultism, to the Vril Society, or even to ancient technologies recovered from archaeological digs. Others draw connections between Diglock and the infamous Kecksburg UFO incident in Pennsylvania in 1965, where witnesses described a metallic acorn-shaped object that crashed in the woods before being swiftly removed by the military. Was it coincidence or retrieval? But for all the speculation, perhaps the most unsettling detail is the silence. After 1945, all mention of the bell vanishes. No trace of the machine has ever been found. No recovered parts, no records in Allied archives. Whatever it was, if it was, disappeared completely. Today, hikers sometimes stumble upon the henge, unaware of the stories surrounding it. There are no signs, no fences, just quiet broken stone in a clearing and the wind through the trees. And in that silence, the questions persist. What was Glock really designed to do? Why were so many resources devoted to a project with no official legacy? And if it truly succeeded, if even part of the rumors are true, what happened in those final days that made it vanish without a trace? Sometimes history does not leave behind ruins or relics. Sometimes it leaves behind only an echo. And in the case of Diglock, it is a sound no one has ever been able to explain. Beneath the cold, grey skies of northern France, a strange formation appeared along a rural road in 1944, row upon row of... What if the history of World War II, the most documented conflict in human history, was still hiding secrets no one can explain? Across the scorched ruins of battlefields and deep within locked military archives, there are stories that never made the textbooks. Vanishing battalions that disappeared without a trace. Encrypted messages no one has ever cracked. Strange artifacts discovered in bunkers long after the war was over, sealed behind walls that were never meant to be opened, and whispers of covert experiments that challenge the very limits of science, morality, and reason. This isn't the history you think you know. It's the shadow beneath it, because even in a war defined by chaos and global destruction, there were moments so bizarre, so chillingly precise, or utterly inexplicable that they raise more questions than answers. So sit back, clear your mind, and get ready to journey through the forgotten corners of World War II. The mysteries that remain buried, waiting for someone to finally notice. Let's begin. Deep within the opulent corridors of the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, a room once shimmered like a frozen sunrise. Its walls were not of marble or gold, but of something far more delicate and infinitely more rare. Amber, glowing honey gold panels inlaid with intricate mosaics and gilded carvings reflected the flickering light of chandeliers in a dazzling display of warmth and wonder. It was a chamber unlike any other in the world, a masterpiece of Baroque art and craftsmanship hailed by many as the eighth wonder of the world. This was the Amber Room, constructed in the early 18th century in Prussia and later gifted to Peter the Great of Russia as a gesture of diplomacy. The room was dismantled and reassembled within the Russian imperial palace. Over time, it became a symbol of cultural grandeur, a fusion of political alliance and artistic brilliance carefully maintained for over 2 centuries. But in 1941, everything changed. As German forces advanced into Soviet territory during the World War II, the Amber Room became a target. Despite Russian efforts to conceal it behind wallpaper and protective coverings, the Nazis knew precisely what they were looking for. The room was looted, disassembled piece by piece, and shipped to Königsberg in East Prussia, present-day Kinnenrad. There it was reportedly installed in Königsberg Castle, where it remained on display for a time until the bombs began to fall. By 1945, Königsberg was a city under siege. Bombed by the Allies and later overtaken by the Red Army, its historic core was reduced to ruins. And within those crumbling stones, the Amber Room simply vanished. No trace, no panels, no photographs of its destruction. Just silence and the yawning absence of something once so luminous. Where did it go? Theories abound. Some believe it was destroyed in the Allied bombings, reduced to ash in the fires that consumed the castle. But amber, though delicate, is surprisingly resilient, and no remnants were ever conclusively found. Others are convinced that the Nazis, knowing the end was near, hid the panels in underground bunkers or secret railway tunnels, somewhere safe, awaiting a Reich that never rose again. There are whispers of hidden train cars buried in the forests of Poland, of sunken ships at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, of sealed salt mines in Germany, and unexplored caverns in the Czech Republic. Even rumors of a concealed cache beneath a lake bed carefully drained before the room was inmed in darkness. The leads are many, yet none have yielded proof. And then there are stranger possibilities. Could elements of the room have been scattered, sold, or smuggled into private collections? Could the amber, altered or reshaped, still exist in plain sight, its origin forgotten? Or is the entire room waiting, whole and untouched, behind a wall that no one has thought to break? Over the decades, treasure hunters, historians, and intelligence agencies alike have searched for it. A few pieces have surfaced. A Florentine mosaic panel believed to be part of the original room was returned to Russia in 2000 after surfacing in Germany. But the panel alone answers nothing. It only deepens the mystery. Why was it separated from the rest? Who had it for all those years? And if that piece survived, could the others? In 2003, a full-scale reconstruction of the Amber Room was unveiled in the Catherine Palace, painstakingly recreated by Russian artisans using the same techniques and materials. It is a triumph of modern craftsmanship, but also a memorial to the unknown. Because the original, the true Amber Room, remains a ghost, its fate unsolved, its story unfinished. What is it about this room that continues to captivate the world? Is it the beauty of the amber fossilized resin that holds the light of ancient forests within it? Is it the symbolism, the cultural theft, the wartime loss, the desire to reclaim something irretrievably taken? Or is it something more intangible? The idea that history, no matter how carefully recorded, still holds spaces that defy explanation. Today, when you walk the halls of the Catherine Palace and gaze upon the reconstructed Amber Room, you're seeing not only a tribute to what once was, but a question carved in silence. A question that asks, can beauty vanish so completely? And if it hasn't, where even now does the Amber Room glow in the dark? As we move deeper into the shadows of World War II, we leave behind the glow of the lost Amber Room and turn our gaze to the mist-shrouded forests of Lower Silesia, where legends whisper of steel rails, sealed tunnels, and a train that vanished beneath the earth. The landscape is calm now. Pine trees stand like quiet sentinels over the rolling hills near the town of Wobsik in present-day Poland. But in the final desperate months of 1945, this land was a corridor of retreat. As the Red Army surged westward, the German war machine began to crumble, taking with it not just lives and soldiers, but secrets, among them perhaps a train heavy with stolen gold, priceless art, and documents never meant to be seen again. They call it the Nazi gold train. The story begins, as so many wartime legends do, with a murmur, a soldier's confession, a local rumor, a map passed hand to hand. According to these accounts, as Soviet forces closed in on Breslau, now Roswave, high-ranking Nazi officials loaded a train with treasures looted from across occupied Europe. Bars of gold, jewelry, religious artifacts, even works of art stripped from museums, cathedrals, and Jewish homes. Some say the train held military archives, prototypes, or evidence of crimes the Reich wished to erase. Others claim it was simply a vault on rails, a rolling treasury intended to finance the survival of the regime or bribe a path to escape. The train, it is said, departed in early 1945 under heavy SS guard, heading south along the secretive rail lines that wound through Silesia. But somewhere near Wick, it vanished. No official record marks its arrival. No confirmed wreckage was ever found, just silence and a growing myth. What makes this mystery so persistent isn't just the story, it's the setting. During the war, the Nazis undertook vast underground construction projects in this region, particularly as part of Project WWII, a series of fortified tunnels, bunkers, and subterranean complexes carved into the Owl Mountains. Built with forced labor under inhuman conditions, many of these tunnels remain unexplored even today. They are silent, damp, and filled with echoes, and some believe that one of them hides a train. Over the years, treasure hunters, historians, and curious wanderers have followed the rumors. In 2015, the mystery reignited with international fervor when two men, a German and a Pole, claimed they had discovered the location of the fabled train using ground-penetrating radar. According to their report, they had found an anomaly, a 100-minute-long object buried beneath an embankment near the train tracks. Polish authorities cautiously confirmed the presence of a man-made structure underground. The government dispatched the military. Archaeologists arrived and news crews from around the world descended on the quiet town. Excavations began, but what they found was nothing, at least nothing that confirmed the legend. There were signs of collapsed tunnels and disturbed soil, but no train, no gold, no vaults of stolen art. Had the train once been there only to be moved or destroyed? Or had the story always been a mirage, a phantom born of desperation and the chaos of war's final days? The absence of evidence hasn't slowed the story. On the contrary, it has deepened the mystery. Some researchers believe the train was real but redirected into a sealed tunnel, its entrance blown shut by retreating troops. Others point to documents from German archives hinting at movements of armored trains in the region during the same time period. A few even suggest that the entire underground complex of Project WWII was in part designed to hide something far greater than weapons or command posts. And then there are more speculative claims that the train contained occult relics tied to Himmler's fascination with ancient myths, or that it carried something radioactive, intended for a superweapon that never came to be. Some even whisper about chemical or biological agents, cargo too dangerous to be revealed. But beneath all these theories lies a simpler question. If such a train existed, who knew about it? Who loaded it? Who survived to tell the tale? The truth may lie buried not only in the soil of Silesia, but in sealed military archives, in testimonies lost to time, or in a tunnel whose entrance no one has yet found or dared to open. Today, as you walk along the old rail lines, the forest is thick and quiet, but listen closely, and you might hear it. The echo of iron wheels on steel rails fading into the earth, a sound that may never return. The Nazi gold train remains for now one of tanks stood poised in the fields, hulking shapes cast in shadows and mud. Trucks rolled past with clattering noise. Soldiers moved quickly through makeshift camps and radio operators barked orders through the crackle of static. But as night fell and the mist thickened, something strange began to happen. The tanks deflated, the trucks fell silent, and the soldiers disappeared. This wasn't the spearhead of General George S. Patton's fearsome Third Army. It was a mirage, an illusion crafted not from steel and firepower, but from canvas, paint, and sound. It was the work of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, an elite and secretive unit better known by the name whispered in military corridors long after the war ended. The Ghost Army formed in 1944. The Ghost Army was composed of artists, sound engineers, actors, and architects. More than 1,000 men whose battlefield weapons were deception and misdirection. Their mission was simple in purpose, yet extraordinarily complex in execution. To fool the enemy into believing in armies that weren't there. To shape shadows, to manipulate perception, to fight not with bullets but with illusion. Using inflatable tanks and artillery, carefully painted camouflage, scripted soundscapes, and fake radio transmissions, they crafted elaborate decoys that mimicked the appearance and noise of entire divisions. Their operations were often carried out just miles from the front lines, close enough for German reconnaissance planes to glimpse their handiwork, but just far enough to remain out of reach. One of their most daring deceptions came in the lead-up to the crossing of the Rye River in 1945. While real combat troops prepared a surprise assault, the Ghost Army staged a fake build-up dozens of miles away, complete with sound recordings of tanks moving, bridge building, and shouted orders. The ruse worked. German forces diverted their defenses, and the Allied assault proceeded with fewer casualties than expected. But for decades, the story of the Ghost Army remained buried beneath layers of classified documents and forgotten reports. Their work, though vital, was deemed too secret to share, even with the soldiers they were protecting. Many who served in the unit were sworn to silence. It wasn't until the 1990s that their story began to emerge in public view, pieced together from personal diaries, military archives, and scattered interviews. Still, questions linger. How much of what the Ghost Army did was known even to the highest-ranking generals? How far did their operations reach? Were there missions that never made it into the official records? Some researchers believe the unit may have been involved in pre-invasion deceptions far earlier than previously thought, perhaps even tied to the broader Operation Bodyguard. The massive Allied effort to mislead Hitler about the timing and location of the D-Day landings. Others suggest the Ghost Army's techniques weren't just tactical, they were psychological. By manipulating the German command's sense of reality, they planted seeds of doubt that eroded confidence and clarity. Could such deceptions have altered the course of key battles without ever firing a shot? And then there are the rumors, unconfirmed of course, of even stranger assignments, operations that involve not just inflatable vehicles and sound rigs, but subtle psychological manipulation, the spreading of ghost stories, the staging of strange symbols or abandoned gear designed to confuse, frighten, or mislead retreating German troops. Could the Ghost Army have blurred the line between strategic deception and psychological warfare? In many ways, they were artists disguised as soldiers. Some would go on to become celebrated painters, designers, and architects after the war. But during those brief critical months, their canvas was the battlefield. Their brushstrokes were shadows and echoes, and their legacy is something that remains partly hidden even today. The fields where their illusions once stood have long returned to silence. There are no markers, no monuments to their specific locations, only the lingering knowledge that in the war's most chaotic moments, not every army that moved was real. So we are left to ask, what else did the Ghost Army create, then carefully erase? What plans, what prototypes, what unfinished illusions might still be stored away in old crates or locked archives? And if we could see through the veil they once cast over Europe's fields, what strange truths might still lie beneath the surface, quiet, invisible, and waiting to be discovered? As the last echoes of inflatable tanks and sonic deception fade from the war-torn fields of Europe, our journey takes a sharp turn toward the bottom of the world. Antarctica, a continent of silence, white, endless, untouched. A frozen expanse of ancient ice and howling wind, where even the sun disappears for months at a time. It is here, among the towering glaciers and icy plateaus, that one of the strangest military missions in modern history unfolded. A mission cloaked in mystery, contradiction, and enduring speculation. It was called Operation High Jump. Officially launched in August of 1946, just 1 year after the end of World War II, Operation High Jump was one of the largest Antarctic expeditions ever assembled. Led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, it involved over 4,000 military personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. The United States Navy called it a training and scientific expedition, a chance to test men and machines in extreme conditions, a peaceful endeavor of exploration. But the scale of the mission and the secrecy that surrounded it suggested something more. Why did a post-war expedition to a frozen wasteland require such overwhelming military force? Why the battleships, the aircraft carriers, the heavily armed escort? And why, after only a few months, far short of its projected timeline, was the operation abruptly halted and the fleet recalled. To understand the enigma of Operation High Jump, we must look first at what we know. Admiral Byrd was no stranger to the Antarctic. A celebrated polar explorer, he had led previous expeditions to the region in the 1920s and 30s. But this operation, conducted under the flag of the US Navy, marked a dramatic escalation. Though the official report described goals such as establishing a base, Little America 4 testing cold weather equipment, and mapping the terrain, the mission's sudden termination left many questions unanswered. And in the silence, speculation grew. Some point to no Schwabenland, a sector of Antarctica claimed by Nazi Germany in 1939. During the war, there were reports, never fully verified, of German submarines traveling to this remote region, allegedly establishing hidden bases or supply caches beneath the ice. Rumors persisted that high-ranking Nazi officials escaped south in the final days of the war, fleeing to this isolated sanctuary far from Allied reach. Could Operation High Jump have been more than exploration? Could it have been a search, and perhaps a confrontation with something the Allies feared had survived? In a cryptic interview following the mission, Admiral Byrd himself made a puzzling remark to a South American newspaper. He warned of the possibility that enemy aircraft could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. The statement, left unexplained, only fueled further speculation. Was he referencing advanced German technology, a new threat unknown to the public, or merely issuing a general warning amid rising Cold War tensions? Then there's the timeline. Operation High Jump was expected to last 6 to 8 months. It was cut short after only 2, the official reason, weather and logistics. But some within conspiracy circles believe something else occurred. An encounter, a discovery, or perhaps a decision to leave something undisturbed. The more speculative theories are varied and far-reaching. Some believe that remnants of the Nazi regime had continued secret experiments in the Antarctic, developing advanced propulsion technology, perhaps linked to the same scientific fringe that birthed legends like Diglock, the Nazi Bell. Others claim that underground caverns in Antarctica hide not just human secrets, but older, deeper ones, artifacts, ruins, or civilizations lost to time. There are even claims unsupported by verifiable evidence of mysterious aerial sightings during the expedition, lights moving unnaturally, equipment failure, aircraft that never returned. It's important to distinguish fact from fiction. No conclusive evidence has ever emerged proving the existence of Nazi bases in Antarctica. No direct confrontation was recorded. And yet, Operation High Jump remains a puzzle, not because of what we know, but because of what we still don't. Why the urgency? Why the military scale? And why has so little of the mission's raw footage, data, and field notes ever reached the public? Today, the icy expanse of Antarctica remains as impenetrable as ever. Modern satellite imagery has opened up much of the continent's surface, but the depths beneath the ice remain largely unexplored. Tunnels carved by geothermal heat, subglacial lakes sealed for millions of years, entire ecosystems, and perhaps secrets locked in frozen stillness. And so we ask, what, if anything, was discovered during those weeks in 1946? Was Operation High Jump merely a test of cold weather endurance? Or something far more cautious? A probe into shadows no one was prepared to face. The ice holds its silence well, but somewhere beneath that frozen horizon, a story may still be waiting to be told. From the icebound silence of Antarctica, where the true mission of Operation High Jump remains frozen in secrecy, we now journey to a place of dense heat and impenetrable foliage, where myths of buried treasure cling to the roots of the earth like vines, a place where gold, blood, and silence seem forever entangled. The Philippines. Here, deep in the mountains of Luzon, in dark caves and narrow shafts hidden beneath the jungle canopy, legend speaks of a treasure so vast it defies comprehension. Crates of gold bars stacked like bricks, jewel-encrusted artifacts, and priceless religious relics looted from across Asia. They call it Yamashita's gold. The story begins in the final years of World War II. As Japan's empire crumbled and Allied forces closed in on the Pacific, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, known as the Tiger of Malaya, was tasked with defending the Philippines from invasion. But according to persistent accounts, many of which have never been officially verified, he was also entrusted with protecting something else: the hidden spoils of an empire's relentless expansion. From the fall of Singapore to the looting of Burma, Thailand, and China, Japan's forces had plundered countless palaces, temples, and banks. The wealth, gold, jewels, ivory, sacred scrolls, was reportedly transported to the Philippines, intended to be shipped back to the Japanese mainland. But as the Allies advanced, the plan changed. Instead of evacuation, the treasure was buried. According to these accounts, Japanese engineers under the supervision of high-ranking military officials and even members of the imperial family began hiding the treasure in elaborate underground complexes, fortified tunnels, booby-trapped caverns, and sealed vaults. Some were allegedly rigged with explosives, others flooded intentionally. In many versions of the story, the workers who built these hiding places were executed to keep the locations a secret. By the time General Yamashita surrendered in 1945, the treasure had vanished. Was it truly hidden, or did it ever exist? For decades, treasure hunters, intelligence agents, and fortune seekers have tried to answer that question. In the 1970s, a Filipino locksmith named Roelio Roxas claimed that he had found one of the vaults beneath Baguio City. What he described was astonishing: a golden Buddha, hollow and filled with diamonds along with stacks of gold bars. But after showing the treasure to intermediaries, Roxas was allegedly arrested. The Buddha disappeared, the gold vanished, and Roxas would later accuse then-President Ferdinand Marcos of seizing the loot. The case led to a dramatic legal battle in Hawaii, where a US court in 1996 ruled in favor of Roxas's estate, acknowledging that the treasure likely existed and had indeed been taken. But how much was really found, and was it only a fraction of something far greater? Some historians dismiss the legend entirely, arguing that it lacks documentation, that no Allied intelligence reports, no captured Japanese records, and no testimony from Yamashita himself mention any such treasure. They point to the fog of war, the spread of rumor, and the human desire to believe in hidden riches. Yet others remain unconvinced by the skeptics. Over the years, maps have surfaced. Testimonies from former soldiers, Japanese and Filipino, have hinted at secret burial sites marked by obscure symbols, unusual land purchases, unexplained military interest in certain areas, and even alleged satellite scans showing geometric voids beneath the jungle have only deepened the intrigue. Why would so many continue the search if there was truly nothing to find? Some believe the treasure was never meant to be recovered, that it was a symbolic sacrifice, wealth hidden forever, unreachable by enemy hands. Others argue that much of it was found but quietly, that governments, including the United States, may have secretly retrieved portions of the hoard during the early Cold War, using it to fund covert operations or political campaigns. And then there are the more speculative claims that the treasure included sacred artifacts looted from ancient dynasties, or even pre-Oden relics passed through empires for centuries. That what's buried beneath the Philippines is more than just gold, its history itself sealed in darkness. Today, the jungles of Luzon are as dense and silent as ever. The air is thick, the terrain unforgiving. Some caves are marked on no map. Others have collapsed, perhaps sealing their secrets forever. The promise of Yamashita's gold continues to lure the curious and the obsessed. But the deeper question remains: if the treasure is real, who buried it? And who, if anyone, has already found it? And if it has yet to be uncovered, what stories, what truths, and what consequences might lie waiting beneath the soil. Some mysteries fade with time. Others, like the legend of Yamashita's gold, seem only to grow stronger, buried not just in the earth, but in the spaces between what we know and what we dare to believe. From the jungles of Luzon and the long-lost trail of Yamashita's gold, we step now into a stranger world. One less tangible, less easily traced on a map. A world of symbols, rituals, and ideology. A realm where myth and power entwined in ways historians still struggle to explain. Germany, 1930s. Beneath the polished surface of a rising empire, strange beliefs began to take root. Quiet at first, then increasingly interwoven with the ambitions of the state. In the flickering candlelight of old castles, under banners embroidered with runes and wolves' heads, a secretive branch of the Nazi regime was forming. Its purpose was not military conquest. It was something older, more abstract, and far more difficult to define. It was called Anenerba, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society. To the outside world, it appeared to be an academic institution. Founded in 1935 under the authority of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, Anenerba was tasked with researching the archaeological and cultural history of the so-called Aryan race. But its mission beneath the surface extended far beyond archaeology. Himmler believed that history had been falsified, that the ancient past held truths lost or deliberately obscured by modern science and religion. He dreamed of rediscovering a mystical origin, a forgotten lineage of Germanic greatness tied to ancient gods, vanished civilizations, and supernatural forces. And so through Anunnaki, he began to search. Expeditions were launched to Tibet, the Arctic, and the Middle East. Archaeologists and linguists traveled in secret, seeking evidence of a primordial Aryan homeland. Some imagined it in Atlantis, others in Hyper-Orion, a mythic land beyond the North Wind. Stone tablets, skull measurements, runic inscriptions, all were collected, interpreted, and in many cases twisted to fit a vision shaped more by mysticism than method. But the most chilling chapter of Anenerba's history lies not in what it searched for, but what it believed. Inside Wewelsburg Castle in Westphalia, Himmler established what he envisioned as a spiritual center for the SS, a place of rituals adorned with occult symbols, black suns, ancient runes, and geometric patterns drawn from Norse and pre-Christian traditions. He imagined a new knightly order rising from its halls, bound by blood, secrecy, and destiny. What took place inside those stone walls? Were there rituals, ceremonies, attempts to summon forces beyond the physical? The records are incomplete. Many were destroyed in the final months of the war, but fragments remain. Blueprints for the castle's redesign, inscriptions on the marble floor of the Hall of the Dead, and testimonies from Allied soldiers who entered the site and found strange relics that defied easy explanation. Was it simply symbolic theater, a misguided attempt to resurrect a glorified past through pageantry and pseudoscience? Or was there something more? Some accounts, though impossible to verify, suggest that the Nazi occult division was not merely researching myths, but trying to harness them. Alleged efforts to decode ancient texts that referenced energy manipulation, ritual sites aligned with celestial bodies, or even esoteric knowledge buried in forgotten languages. Anunnaki researchers reportedly collected occult manuscripts from across Europe, including rare alchemical treatises, grimoires, and mystical diagrams. Some were seized from private collections, others from monasteries and universities. And yet to this day, many of these documents remain missing. After the fall of Berlin, Allied forces discovered parts of the Anenerba archive, but much had already been evacuated or destroyed. Other pieces, curiously, were said to have disappeared into Soviet hands. Still others may have entered the possession of private collectors far from public view. What secrets, if any, were contained in those pages? Did Anerba uncover something real beneath the layers of myth and madness? Or did their obsession with the occult reflect only the psychological desperation of a regime searching for cosmic validation? The more you examine the traces, the more the picture blurs. There's the well-documented Nazi fascination with the Spear of Destiny, believed by some to be the lance that pierced the side of Christ, held in Vienna and later, allegedly, moved to Nuremberg. Hitler's personal obsession with the spear is recorded, though what power he believed it held remains speculative. There's also the persistent myth that Nazi scientists attempted to weaponize esoteric knowledge, experimenting with sound frequencies, ancient symbols, or forgotten energy sources. Claims of electromagnetic field research at concentration camps, though horrifying, are rooted more in speculation than proven fact. Yet, these stories continue to surface year after year. Why? Perhaps it's because totalitarian regimes often weaponize myth. They reach backward into history, not for clarity, but for justification. The occult in this context becomes less about belief and more about control. Still, one cannot entirely dismiss the shadows, the insignias carved in stone, the sealed files, the sudden disappearances of artifacts never seen again. Even now, historians occasionally unearth hints of projects not listed in any official war. Ledger, projects initiated not in the name of war, but in pursuit of something deeper, stranger and perhaps unknowable. And so we are left with a question that stretches beyond conventional history. Did the Nazi occult division truly uncover ancient knowledge? Or were they chasing shadows, dangerous ones, until the very end? Whatever the truth, one thing remains certain. Some mysteries are not merely hidden in the past. They are hidden in how the past was remembered or deliberately forgotten. From the dim corridors of Wewelsburg Castle and the secretive rites of the Nazi occult division, we now descend into a very different kind of darkness, one that lies cold, deep, and eternal. Beneath the rolling waves of the North Atlantic, where time stands still and silence swallows all, one of the most legendary submarines of World War II vanished without a trace. This is the mystery of U-47. When U-47 slipped quietly from its berth at Kiel on October 14, 1939, it was just another piece of Germany's expanding naval machine. But within hours, it would etch its name into history. Commanded by the bold and celebrated Gunther Prien, U-47 crept undetected into the heavily guarded British naval base at Scapa Flow, and in a daring nighttime raid, torpedoed and sank the battleship HMS Royal Oak, taking over 800 lives with it. It was a moment that shocked the world and electrified the Nazi propaganda machine. Pry returned to Germany a hero. U-47 became a symbol of stealth, courage, and naval prowess. Over the next 18 months, U-47 would continue its deadly patrols, racking up over 30 merchant ship kills and becoming one of the most successful submarines in the Kriegsmarine fleet. It was sleek, fast, and lethal. But in March of 1941, during what seemed to be a routine mission in the North Atlantic, U-47 disappeared. There was no distress signal, no wreckage, no survivors, just silence. The last radio transmission from U-47 came on March the 6th, 1941. After that, nothing. The official explanation offered by the British Admiralty at the time was that the submarine had likely been destroyed by depth charges from the British destroyer HMS Wolverine, which had been active in the area. But post-war analysis cast doubt on this claim. The timeline didn't match. Wolverine may have attacked a submarine, but whether it was U-47 is uncertain. No oil slick, no debris, no confirmation. So what happened? Theories have circulated for decades. Some believe U-47 may have fallen victim to a malfunction, a torpedo detonation inside the tube, a battery explosion, or a diving failure that led to implosion at depth. German U-boats were notoriously dangerous, even to their own crews. The smallest error could turn the vessel into a steel coffin, and yet no evidence of mechanical failure has ever been found. No wreck has ever been definitively identified as U-47. Others suggest that the submarine may have been attacked by an Allied aircraft, its demise swift and undocumented in the confusion of the open sea. But again, no logs, no wreck, no bodies. More speculative theories begin to emerge in the gaps left behind. One theory proposes that U-47 may have fallen victim to a friendly fire incident, perhaps from another German U-boat operating in the area, its presence unknown in the murky fog of war. But such mistakes, while possible, would likely have left some trace and intercepted transmission, a report filed in confusion, yet none surfaced. And then there are those who suggest that U-47's mission that March wasn't routine at all. According to some researchers, the submarine may have been carrying more than torpedoes. It may have been on a special operation, perhaps linked to the transport of high-ranking officials, confidential documents, or experimental technology. The lack of any post-war confirmation only fuels the speculation. What if U-47 was under strict radio silence? What if its disappearance was intentional, planned, or covered up? More fringe claims take the mystery even further. A few theorists have drawn connections between U-47 and secret post-war escape routes, similar to the rumors surrounding Nazi movements to South America. They suggest the submarine may have been repurposed in the waning stages of the war for clandestine operations. Its fate hidden by both sides for reasons we may never fully understand. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is the simplest one, that U-47 lies somewhere intact and alone at the bottom of the Atlantic, its hull crushed, its crew entombed in silence, its coordinates still unknown. That somewhere beneath miles of water, beneath layers of silt in memory, the answer still exists, just out of reach. Modern sonar surveys of the Atlantic seafloor have uncovered hundreds of wrecks, but many remain unidentified. The ocean is vast, and U-47's final known position was vague at best. Expeditions have searched, researchers have combed naval records, yet the submarine remains one of the few vessels from the war whose fate is still officially unsolved, and so the legend persists. U-47 is remembered not just for its devastating effectiveness or its dramatic raid on Scape of Flow, but for its vanishing act, a vessel that disappeared so completely it seems to have slipped out of history itself. What was it carrying? What happened on those final days at sea? And why, after all these years, have we found nothing? Not even a whisper beneath the waves. Sometimes war leaves behind ruins. Other times it leaves only questions. And beneath the cold, black depths of the Atlantic, the shadow of U-47 continues to drift in silence. A ghost in the deep waiting to be found. After tracing the silent depths where U-47 disappeared into the Atlantic, we turn our eyes upward to the skies above Europe and the Pacific, where a different kind of mystery unfolded. It wasn't hidden in shadows or lost to time. It was seen, chased, reported, but never explained. They called them Foo Fighters. Glowing orbs, dancing lights, flickering shapes that followed Allied pilots through the air, sometimes for minutes at a time. They didn't attack, they didn't communicate. They simply appeared, defying all known laws of flight. The term was first popularized by the US 415th Night Fighter Squadron in late 1944. These were elite crews trained to intercept enemy bombers under cover of darkness. But what they encountered in the skies over Germany was unlike anything they had faced before. Imagine the cockpit of a twin-engine fighter humming at altitude over war-blackened Europe. Searchlights sweep the sky below. Radio chatter flickers between static bursts. And then suddenly out of the darkness, a light appears, a bright orange sphere. It hovers near the wing, matching speed and altitude. It doesn't drift as a flare might. It doesn't fall away like a meteor. It moves with intention, staying just out of reach, unresponsive to gunfire or evasive maneuvers. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanishes into the night. Pilots described the lights as balls of fire or Christmas lights that flew in formation, performed impossible aerial maneuvers, and sometimes even penetrated bomber formations without causing damage. They were seen over Germany, France, Italy, even the South Pacific. Some appeared red, others white, amber, or silver. They were usually silent and always enigmatic. At first, the sightings were dismissed. War is chaotic. Pilots were exhausted. Explanations ranged from combat stress to atmospheric phenomena, but the reports kept coming. And they weren't just from Americans. British Royal Air Force crews reported them. So did Soviet aviators. Even German pilots, on rare occasions, spoke of strange lights tailing their aircraft. Lights that did not belong to either side. So what were they? One of the most widely accepted explanations at the time was St. Elmo's fire, an electrical discharge that can occur around aircraft or ship masts during thunderstorms. But Foo Fighters were often seen in clear skies at high altitudes, and they moved in ways no natural phenomenon should. Others suggested they were advanced Nazi technology, perhaps prototypes of infrared tracking devices, high-speed drones, or experimental aerial flares. The Nazis were, after all, developing jet aircraft, guided bombs, and even rudimentary cruise missiles by the war's end. Could these lights have been part of an early electronic warfare campaign? Yet no captured documents, no testimonies from German scientists, and no post-war research ever confirmed such a program. Then there are the stranger theories. Some link footers to Der Glock, the so-called Nazi bell, theorizing that experimental propulsion systems or field-generating devices might have caused aerial anomalies. Others point to electromagnetic or plasma-based phenomena, rogue manifestations of energy triggered by high-altitude flight radio frequencies, or unknown variables in the upper atmosphere. And beyond that, there are those who speculate that the Foo Fighters were not of this earth at all. Not aggressive, not hostile, simply watching. It's a claim that's been repeated in post-war decades by UFO researchers and military veterans alike, that the phenomenon wasn't invented by the Cold War, but predated it, that the skies over World War II were already being visited by something unknown, that the chaos of global conflict may have drawn attention from observers we don't yet understand. It's worth noting that these sightings occurred before the modern wave of UFO fascination, before Roswell, before radar reports and television specials. These were battle-hardened pilots trained to read the sky with precision. Many of them kept silent until decades later, not because they were silenced, but because they feared ridicule. And yet, across different squadrons in different theaters of war, the descriptions were remarkably consistent. In the decades since, no conclusive explanation has emerged. Declassified military documents reference the phenomenon, but offer no answers. The post-war scientific community largely avoided the topic, and even modern investigations have failed to reproduce or track any such objects with certainty. But the reports remain unresolved, unexplained. Foo Fighters are one of the rare wartime mysteries that left no wreckage, no missing persons, no encrypted files, just testimony, visual confirmation, and a silence that seems too deliberate to dismiss. So we ask, what did these pilots really see in the skies? Were the Foo Fighters an enemy project, a misunderstood natural event, or something else entirely? And why even now have they left no trace, no evidence beyond memory and logbooks? Perhaps the war-torn skies of the 1940s held more than bombers and bullets. Perhaps for a brief moment something else looked down upon the conflict below. Not to intervene, not to judge, but simply to observe, and then, like the war itself, disappear into history, leaving only questions behind. As the mysterious Foo Fighters vanished into the skies above wartime Europe, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions, some believe their echoes reappeared. Years later, on the other side of the world, It was the evening of December 9th, 1965, in the quiet town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, nestled among the rolling hills and frozen woods of Westmoreland County. Just after sunset, the sky came alive with fire. Witnesses across 6 U.S. states and parts of Canada reported seeing a blazing object streak across the horizon, a fiery trail that lit up the dusk, moving silently at first, then with a deep, resonant rumble. Some thought it was a meteor, others a crashing aircraft. But what came next was stranger still. In Kecksburg, a few miles from the center of town, residents claimed the object came down in the woods, not with an explosion, but a controlled descent. Some said they saw blue smoke rising between the trees. Others described a metallic acorn-shaped object, large and heavy, partially embedded in the earth, its surface engraved with strange markings that resembled hieroglyphs or symbols no one could read. Then came the military. Within hours, the area was cordoned off. U.S. Army trucks arrived. Soldiers were seen entering the woods. Civilian onlookers were turned away. Cameras were reportedly confiscated. By nightfall, the object, if it had been there, was gone, hauled away under a tarp, some say, in the back of a military flatbed truck. No photographs, no wreckage left behind, just stories, witnesses, silence. So what crashed or landed in Kecksburg that night? The US government's official position was that nothing of significance was found. At various points, it was suggested that the fireball had been a meteorite or perhaps the decay of a Soviet satellite, Cosmos 96, launched just days earlier, but records later revealed that Cosmos 96 had re-entered Earth's atmosphere over Canada much earlier than the Kecksburg event. The trajectories didn't match. The timelines didn't fit. If it wasn't a satellite and it wasn't a meteor, then what was it? Some researchers believe it may have been a classified military vehicle, a prototype re-entry capsule, or an experimental spy satellite. In the 1960s, the Cold War was at its peak. Both the United States and the Soviet Union were pushing the limits of aerospace engineering. Accidents, when they occurred, were often hidden behind layers of disinformation. Could Kecksburg have been one of those accidents? Something that came down where it wasn't supposed to, too close to civilian eyes. Others point to deeper connections, threads that stretch back to earlier, more obscure chapters of wartime history. The object, they note, bore a striking resemblance to accounts of Die Glock, the so-called Nazi bell, an experimental device rumored to have been part of a secret Nazi program near the end of World War II. The descriptions match. A metallic bell or acorn-shaped object marked with cryptic writing emitting a strange energy or glow. Could the Kecksburg craft have been a remnant of that lost technology, recovered, re-engineered, and still active decades later? It's a bold theory and one without hard evidence. But the questions remain. Why did the military respond so quickly and so decisively to a rural crash site that, according to official accounts, held nothing unusual? Why were witnesses dismissed and records sealed? And why, when FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, requests were filed decades later, did the US government claim that certain key records had been lost or destroyed? The Kecksburg incident may lack the cultural weight of Roswell, but in many ways it is stranger. There were no stories of alien bodies, no recovered debris scattered across a desert. Just a silent descent, a metallic shape, and a rapid military recovery. Then nothing. Yet, the story refuses to fade. In the years since, documentaries, books, and government inquiries have all revisited the case. Journalists have uncovered inconsistencies in the official narrative. Former servicemen have come forward with second-hand accounts. And in Kecksburg itself, the incident has become part of the town's identity. A monument marks the event, and a replica of the object stands outside the fire station, modeled from eyewitness sketches. But still, the central mystery endures. What fell in the woods of Kecksburg on that cold night in 1965? Was it a Cold War artifact drifting off course? A foreign object not of this earth or not of this era? Or was it something we haven't yet conceived? A piece of technology lost between two wars, hidden by two governments, waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps the truth lies buried deep in the forest floor, or deeper still in the archives of agencies that no longer acknowledge its existence. Or perhaps the truth, like the object itself, slipped quietly away in the back of a truck, never to be seen again. And so we wonder, was Kecksburg a Cold War footnote, or the end of a much older story finally falling from the sky? As the echoes of Kecksburg's mysterious crash faded into the silence of sealed records and whispered sightings, our journey now drifts east, into the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, into an area marked not by borders or battle lines, but by something far more elusive, vanishing points. This is the story of Flight 19, a routine training mission that became one of the most enduring and puzzling disappearances of the post-war era. A mystery that has for nearly 8 decades defied answers and drawn the eyes of historians, skeptics, and dreamers alike. It was the afternoon of December 5, 1945, just months after the end of World War II. At 2:10 p.m., 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a standard navigation exercise. The sky was partly cloudy, the sea calm. The plan was simple: fly east to the Bahamas, execute a series of turns over open water, then return to base. Total flight time under 3 hours. The aircraft were in formation. Each was fully fueled with experienced pilots on board. Leading them was Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a veteran with over 2,500 flying hours. By all accounts, the flight began uneventfully. Then something changed. At around 3:40 p.m., radio operators began receiving fragmented transmissions. Lieutenant Taylor reported that his compasses had malfunctioned, and he wasn't sure of his position. He believed they had flown off course, possibly over the Florida Keys or worse, into the open Atlantic. As the minutes passed, his voice grew more uncertain. At one point, he stated, "Everything looks strange, even the ocean." And later, "We are entering white water. Nothing seems right." As the sun set, weather deteriorated and communication became increasingly erratic. Attempts to guide Flight 19 back to base failed. At 6:20 p.m., the final garbled message came through. "It looks like we are entering rough seas. We're not sure." Then, silence. A massive search and rescue operation was launched immediately, one of the largest in US naval history at the time. Planes scoured the skies. Ships combed the waves. But no trace of Flight 19 was ever found. No wreckage, no bodies, no signals, nothing. As if the aircraft and their crews had simply disappeared. And in a cruel twist of fate, a PBM Mariner rescue plane dispatched to locate Flight 19 also vanished that very night, with 13 men aboard. Though a mid-air explosion was reported by a passing merchant ship, no definitive wreckage from that aircraft was ever recovered either. What could cause 6 military aircraft, each equipped with radios, compasses, and trained crews, to vanish in a matter of hours? Theories have abounded for decades. The most conventional explanation suggests navigational error. That Taylor, confused by faulty instruments or disoriented by changing weather, led the flight too far east out over the Atlantic, where fuel eventually ran out, forcing the planes to ditch into the sea. The ocean, unpredictable and vast, may have swallowed the wreckage entirely. But this explanation doesn't satisfy everyone. Why did multiple compasses fail across different aircraft? Why were the pilots, all trained in overwater navigation, so unable to determine their position? And why was no debris ever found? Not even a trace of the rescue plane. Some suggest an electromagnetic anomaly, a disturbance in the Earth's magnetic field that could have disrupted instruments and communication. The area where Flight 19 disappeared, after all, lies within what would later become known as the Bermuda Triangle, a zone infamous for unexplained disappearances of ships and aircraft. Others have proposed that spatial disorientation or weather mirages may have played a role, tricking the pilot's perception and leading them farther off course than they realized. There's also the possibility of military secrecy, that the planes were carrying unknown cargo or engaged in classified exercises that led to an accident kept deliberately out of public view. And then there are the fringe theories that Flight 19 encountered a portal, A rift in space-time, perhaps triggered by unknown atmospheric conditions. That the planes were somehow abducted or transported elsewhere, out of time or out of this world. That the ocean itself, as ancient sailors once feared, can sometimes swallow not just ships and men, but all trace of their existence. It's easy to dismiss such ideas. And yet the facts remain. 5 planes disappeared in formation. A 6th vanished during the search, and despite countless investigations, no physical evidence has ever been recovered. In the years since, the story of Flight 19 has passed into legend. Memorials have been raised. The case has been reopened, reanalyzed, and reclassified. But the core mystery remains untouched, and unsolved. What really happened that day in the skies above the Atlantic? Was it merely human error compounded by weather and failing instruments? Or was Flight 19 a victim of something more elusive? Something that still drifts over those waters, hidden beneath the surface or behind the clouds. The ocean remains silent. But for those who look toward the horizon and wonder, Flight 19 still circles somewhere beyond the edge of the known. A symbol of how, even in a world mapped by war and science, some stories refuse to land. As the mystery of Flight 19 fades into the horizon, swallowed by clouds, waves, and unanswered questions, we turn to a different kind of disappearance. Not a squadron of bombers or a convoy of ships, but one man, a musician, a symbol of American morale in the darkest years of war, and a figure whose vanishing left behind not only silence, but a ghostly echoes still heard today. Glenn Miller, band leader, trombonist, composer, a household name during World War II, his swing arrangements, In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, Tuxedo Junction, lifted spirits on both sides of the Atlantic. He didn't carry a rifle or fly a plane, but he was a weapon in his own right, part of the United States Army Air Force's psychological arsenal, a cultural force against despair. And then, without warning, he was gone. It was December 15, 1944. Miller, recently promoted to major, was preparing to travel from England to newly liberated Paris. His band had already crossed the Channel to set up for a series of concerts for Allied troops. Eager to rejoin them, Miller boarded a small UC-64 Norseman aircraft from RAF Twinwood Farm in Bedfordshire. The weather was cold with fog thickening along the coast. The plane's pilot, Lieutenant John Morgan, had little experience flying in such conditions, but they departed nonetheless. 3 men aboard, the pilot, Glenn Miller, and Colonel Norman Bassell, a logistics officer. The flight was not logged officially. No flight plan was filed with Central Air Traffic, and the Norseman never arrived. No mayday call, no wreckage recovered, no trace ever found. So, what happened to Glenn Miller? The official narrative for decades was simple: mechanical failure. The Norseman, like many aircraft of the time, had a design flaw in cold weather. Its carburetor could freeze, cutting the engine mid-flight. In such conditions, a sudden stall over the frigid English Channel could be fatal. The plane, it was believed, crashed into the water and sank without a trace. But as the years passed, the simplicity of that explanation began to unravel. Why was no debris ever recovered despite ongoing searches? Why wasn't the flight more carefully recorded given Miller's high-profile status? And why, as war records slowly declassified, did inconsistencies begin to emerge? In the late 1980s, a new theory gained traction proposed by a former Royal Air Force navigator named Fred Shaw. According to his account, on the day of Miller's disappearance, a group of RAF Lancaster bombers returning from a cancelled mission had to jettison their unused bombs over the Channel before landing. Shaw claimed that he and others watched from the air as a small Norseman-like aircraft flew beneath the bomber formation at just the wrong time, disappearing in the midst of the falling payload. Could Glenn Miller have been the victim of a tragic case of friendly fire? The theory was never officially confirmed. RAF records acknowledged that such bomb dumps were routine, but no documentation links the incident directly to Miller's flight. Still, the timing, the location, and the eyewitness descriptions continue to spark debate. Others speculate something darker. Some believe Miller was involved in covert operations, perhaps a diplomatic or intelligence mission disguised under the pretense of entertainment. His flight, according to this theory, may have been kept deliberately off the books with his disappearance obscured to protect higher-level secrecy. One version suggests he may have died not in a plane crash but in Paris, caught in an assassination or political mishap, later concealed to avoid scandal. These claims, though intriguing, lack solid evidence. Then there are the more fringe accounts, rumors that Miller was never on the plane at all, that he vanished willingly, that he was captured, or that he lived on under a different name. The details lost beneath layers of confusion and wartime censorship, but behind every theory, one truth remains. Glenn Miller vanished without a trace. In a war filled with unimaginable losses, perhaps his was just another name among millions. Yet for many, his disappearance feels different, personal. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a voice, a melody that accompanied every letter from home, every dance in a makeshift barracks, every final moment on foreign soil. And so the mystery endures. Was it mechanical failure? A tragic accident beneath a falling bomb load, or something else? Something we still haven't uncovered. The English Channel, cold and unknowable, has never returned his remains. But Glenn Miller's music still floats on the air, ageless, unbroken. A sound that outlived the war, and perhaps a clue to a story not yet fully told, as the sound of Glenn Miller's vanished melody fades into wartime silence. We leave the skies and seas behind and descend into the heart of the Austrian Alps, into a forest so thick and undisturbed it seems to have slipped outside the flow of time itself. Nestled deep within the rugged Salz-Kumut region lies Lake Toplitz, a long, narrow body of water surrounded by towering pines and steep rock faces hidden far from any major road. Its surface is often calm, glass-like, reflecting nothing but the stillness of the alpine wilderness. But beneath that calm exterior lies one of the most enduring and enigmatic mysteries of World War II. What did the Nazis sink into the depths of Lake Toplitz? It's a question that has drawn divers, historians, and adventurers for nearly 80 years. The facts begin with the final months of the war. In 1944 and 1945, as the Third Reich crumbled and Allied forces closed in on Berlin, Nazi officials began frantically hiding documents, wealth, and artifacts across Europe. Castles, caves, and salt mines became makeshift vaults. Train cars were loaded with stolen art, and in the isolated forests of Austria, some say the last secrets of the regime were slipped beneath the surface of Lake Toplitz. In the years that followed, locals told of strange convoys heading into the woods, trucks arriving under cover of night, men in uniform unloading heavy crates and pushing them out onto boats only to return empty. There were whispers that orders had come from high-ranking SS officers, and then silence. In 1959, an Austrian diving expedition brought the legend into the international spotlight. Braving the lake's treacherous depths, divers recovered an astonishing haul. Boxes filled with perfectly forged British pound notes, millions in fake currency created as part of Operation Bernhard, a Nazi plan to destabilize the British economy. The operation, led by SS Major Bernhard Kruger, employed skilled forgers and concentration camp prisoners to produce counterfeit bills so convincing they could fool even bank inspectors. The plan was ultimately never deployed on a large scale, but the discovery of these bills in Lake Toplitz confirmed that the Nazis had indeed used the lake as a dumping ground, and it raised an even more tantalizing question. What else lies down there? The lake's structure is unusual. At roughly 100 meters deep, it is layered in distinct strata. The upper layer is oxygenated fresh water, but below 20 mm, the lake becomes anoxic, devoid of oxygen with no plant or animal life. This unique condition preserves whatever sinks into it in a cold, timeless silence, No bacteria to decay it, no currents to move it, just still, black water and secrecy. Further dives revealed more. SS uniforms, weapons, crates, typewriters. But efforts to explore deeper were plagued by danger. The lake is filled with sunken logs, remnants of centuries-old logging practices suspended underwater like jagged spears. Visibility is poor, diving is treacherous. Several divers have died in the attempt. Still, the stories persist. Some believe that alongside the counterfeit currency, Nazi gold lies buried at the bottom, possibly looted from occupied nations, Jewish families, or hidden wartime reserves. Others suggest that classified documents, SS archives, or even evidence of secret weapons programs were disposed of in the lake to keep them from falling into Allied hands. A more speculative theory links the lake to mythical or occult artifacts, drawing a line between Lake Toplitz and Himmler's obsession with Germanic mysticism and hidden knowledge. Could the lake conceal relics tied to on Arab missions or symbols of Nazi esotericism? There is no proof, but the absence of evidence has only fueled fascination. There are even claims, largely unverified, that US and Soviet intelligence operatives conducted covert dives in the years after the war, extracting unknown materials and quietly retreating. If true, what might they have found? And why has it never been disclosed? Despite modern sonar and diving technology, much of the lake's bottom remains unexamined. Environmental regulations, safety concerns, and funding challenges have all slowed efforts to explore the lake comprehensively. And yet, it remains a magnet for private expeditions and international speculation. Each ripple on its surface seems to conceal another question. Why here? Why this lake, so remote and inaccessible, yet chosen for such deliberate use? What secrets were deemed too dangerous to burn, too valuable to bury, only to be drowned in silence? Today, Lake Toplitz remains as it has always been, serene, quiet, and untouched by modern development. Hikers walk its perimeter, birds call overhead, and beneath the cold water hides a forgotten past. But the allure remains. Perhaps more than treasure or artifacts, what lies hidden in Lake Toplitz is a glimpse into the mind of a collapsing empire, a final act of concealment, a desperate attempt to erase history in a place where time seems to stand still. And so we wonder, what else sleeps beneath these alpine waters? And when the lake is finally drained of mystery, will the truth rise to the surface? Or will it remain as it has for decades, untouched, unseen, and unknown? As the cold waters of Lake Toplitz ripple with the weight of hidden history, we shift from submerged crates and silent depths to something far more personal. A mystery not buried in a forest or locked in a vault, but perhaps erased in plain sight. A missing document, a vanished voice, and a man who in his final days may have known too much. General George S. Patton was one of the most formidable and controversial figures of the Second World War. Known for his blistering speeches, unmatched battlefield tactics, and unfiltered defiance, he commanded respect and fear in equal measure. To some, he was a war hero of unmatched brilliance. To others, a threat to post-war diplomacy, a general who refused to stop fighting even when the war was officially over. But for all his flamboyance in public, Patton kept a meticulous and deeply private diary, a place where thoughts flowed more freely than military orders, where frustrations, insights, and suspicions were recorded in his own hand. That diary, it is said, vanished shortly after his mysterious and untimely death in December 1945. The known events are these. On December 9th, just months after the German surrender, Patton was traveling through the American-occupied zone of Germany near Mannheim when his car was involved in a strange accident. His Cadillac collided with a US Army truck in an otherwise empty intersection. Patton suffered a broken neck, leaving him paralyzed. 12 days later, he was dead. An accident, a tragedy, that's the official account. But questions soon followed. Why were the other passengers unharmed? Why was a slow-moving collision in an open road fatal only to Patton? And what happened in the days following to his personal effects, particularly his diary? Patton's family believed the diary was with him until the moment of his death. According to close aides, he was writing in it regularly during his hospital stay. But after he died, the notebook, along with several of his private letters, was never seen again. It wasn't among his returned possessions. It wasn't in military archives, and it wasn't published with the rest of his war correspondence. Where did it go? And more importantly, what might it have said? In his final months, Patton had become increasingly vocal, both in person and in private writings, about what he saw as the failings of Allied post-war policy. He criticized the Soviet Union openly, warning of future conflict. He expressed frustration with orders to demobilize, believing that Germany should be rebuilt as a bulwark against Stalin. He questioned the morality of Operation Kielhau, the forced repatriation of Soviet PS, many of whom faced execution upon their return, and he made enemies, powerful ones. According to General Patton's biographers, his personal writings included sharp criticisms of military and political leaders. Some claim he hinted at knowledge of classified agreements between the Allies and the Soviets, agreements that, if exposed, could have shaken the fragile post-war balance. There are even claims that he feared he might be silenced. Did Patton's diary contain such revelations? Some believe so. Others argue that no such explosive content existed, only reflections too blunt, too politically dangerous to be preserved in the historical record. Either way, the fact remains a key piece of one of America's most influential military minds disappeared in the immediate aftermath of his death. Over the years, bits and pieces of his journals surfaced, segments that were published or cited by historians, but they are often fragmented, incomplete, and they stop conspicuously in the final weeks of 1945. What happened in those missing pages? More speculative theories have emerged. Some suggest that Patton's death was no accident at all, that it was engineered either by Allied intelligence or rogue elements who saw him as a threat to the emerging post-war order. British intelligence officer Hugh Montgomery later claimed that orders to deal with Patton had circulated in certain circles, though no formal evidence has ever substantiated this. Still, the disappearance of the diary adds weight to the uncertainty. Was it taken by someone who wanted to control the historical narrative? Was it locked away in an archive marked classified and forgotten? Or was it quietly destroyed, its contents deemed too volatile to survive the shifting landscape of Cold War diplomacy? In the absence of proof, we are left with silence. But it is a silence that echoes a brilliant strategist, a blunt critic, a man increasingly out of step with the world around him, and a voice captured in ink that disappeared at the very moment it may have mattered most. So we ask, what truths might have been preserved in Patton's final reflections? What warnings? What regrets? What revelations? And if that diary were to resurface, would we finally see the war's final chapter? Not as it was told, but as one of its most candid witnesses saw it. The last words of General Patton remain missing, and until they are found or confirmed lost, we are left only with the outline of a truth and a question written not in ink, but in absence. As we reflect on the vanished words of General Patton and the silencing of one of the war's most commanding voices, we now turn to a mystery that is altogether different. Quiet, strange, and deeply unsettling. A moment when something arrived but no one did. It was the morning of November 23, 1944, in the Belgian town of Courtenville near the city of Hassel. The war was still raging in the skies above Europe. Allied bombers crisscrossed enemy territory, targeting factories, railways, and troop movements. The air buzzed daily with the sound of engines, the trails of fire, and the looming threat of German anti-aircraft guns. But that day, what descended from the clouds made no sound, and what was found on the ground has puzzled historians ever since. From the haze above, a B-7 Flying Fortress appeared, one of the heavy bombers that had become a symbol of American air power. To those watching from the fields below, it looked damaged, descending at an angle, but surprisingly intact. Witnesses claimed its engines were still sputtering, its flaps were down, the landing gear was extended, and yet it wasn't being guided. The plane floated down almost gently before coming to rest in a flat, open field. There was no crash, no explosion, just a silent arrival, a ghost settling into the earth. When local resistance fighters and then Allied soldiers reached the aircraft, they approached cautiously, expecting wounded men or worse. But what they found defied every rule of war, logic, and flight. There was no one on board. The B-7 was completely empty. The parachutes were still stowed, the flight jackets neatly hung, the oxygen tanks full. The engines showed signs of recent use. Ammunition was stored in its racks untouched. Even the logs and maps were in place. The crew's personal items sat undisturbed as if they had just stepped out for a moment, but the plane had landed itself. How could a massive four-engine bomber with no pilot at the controls navigate through enemy airspace and bring itself down in one piece? The aircraft, later identified by serial number as part of the US 8th Air Force, had been part of a bombing raid over Germany. Its designated crew was eventually tracked down, all alive, all accounted for. They had, according to their debriefing, bailed out after the plane suffered heavy damage and lost altitude. They believed the aircraft would crash, and yet it didn't. Instead, it flew on alone, unwatched over a war zone, across hostile skies through anti-aircraft flak, until it descended gently into that Belgian field. The military officially classified the incident as a rare but not impossible event, a phenomenon of gliding flight, aerodynamic balance, and luck. A once in a war combination of altitude, trim settings, and wind currents that allowed the aircraft to stabilize and descend on its own. But those who saw the plane that morning remember it differently. Some described the landing as too perfect, as if guided. Others noted how the engines continued running briefly after it stopped, almost as if the plane knew it had landed safely. And then there's the strange quiet of the interior. Several who entered the bomber said it felt wrong, as if the aircraft had just missed something, as if time itself had been interrupted or paused, then reset. No signs of struggle.
No sense of urgency, just emptiness.
Speculative theories, as expected, have grown in the decades since. Some suggest that the crew bailed out too soon, that the aircraft never lost control, and might have been flyable had they stayed. Others wonder if something more unusual occurred, perhaps a moment of suspended physics, a confluence of unexplained forces in the sky. There are even stories, though always second-hand, of similar events in both Allied and Axis air fleets. Ghost planes that returned with no pilots, haunted aircraft found with equipment still humming, but no living crew aboard. The term Phantom Fortress was born from this incident, and it lingers in the imagination to this day.
Could a machine become more than metal, more than rivets and fuel lines?
Could it carry out its last mission alone, driven not by orders, but by momentum and memory? Or was it simply a quirk of physics, an improbable, eerie coincidence amid the chaos of war? The original aircraft was eventually salvaged and dismantled.
No memorial marks the spot where it came down.
No flight manual can fully explain how it made its final descent, and so the mystery remains. A flying fortress that flew itself, a war machine that outlasted its operators.
A story suspended somewhere between mechanical probability and the inexplicable. What kept that plane in the air?
And what, if anything, guided it safely home? The field is quiet now, but in the soft wind that moves through the grass, some say you can still hear it. That faint hum just beyond the trees, the echo of engines with no one left inside. As the Phantom Fortress came to rest in a field with no crew, no purpose, and no clear explanation, we now follow another journey, one that also defied logic, official orders, and the very machinery of war itself. But this time it wasn't a ghost plane.
It was a man at the very center of Hitler's inner circle.
And what he chose to do in the spring of 1941 has remained one of the most inexplicable episodes of the entire Second World War. This is the mystery of Rudolf Hess's solo flight to Scotland. On the evening of May 10, 1941, under cover of night, a Messerschmitt Bf 110 twin-engine aircraft took off from Augsburg, Germany. At the controls was not a Luftwaffe pilot or a field officer, but Rudolf Hess, Hitler's longtime deputy and one of the most powerful men in the Third Reich. Alone, without orders and carrying only a compass, a map, and a set of civilian clothes, Hess flew across the North Sea toward Britain. His destination was not London, not a military target, but instead the rolling green hills of Scotland, where he intended, according to his own words, to open secret peace negotiations with the British government, but the plan failed. Hess parachuted from the plane near Eagles, south of Glasgow. He landed in a field and was promptly captured by a local farmer and the Home Guard. When interrogated, he identified himself as Captain Alfred Horn, but quickly revealed his true identity. British intelligence and then Churchill himself was stunned. Why had one of Hitler's most trusted officials risked his life in a solo flight across enemy territory? What had he hoped to accomplish? And more curiously, did he really act alone? The official British account has remained largely consistent over the years. Hess, it claimed, had become mentally unstable, isolated from the rest of the Nazi leadership, plagued by delusions and desperate to regain Hitler's favor. He hatched a bizarre peace mission on his own. His intended target in Britain was the Duke of Hamilton, an aristocrat whom Hess believed could act as a mediator between the German government and sympathetic factions within the British elite. But the timing raises eyebrows. In May 1941, the war was rapidly expanding. Germany was preparing for its massive invasion of the Soviet Union. Britain stood alone in Europe. A secret peace deal, especially one that would free up Germany's Western Front, would have had enormous strategic value. Could Hess have been sent as an unofficial emissary, his mission deniable if captured? That theory has gained traction over time. Some historians suggest that Hess's flight was not entirely unauthorized, that elements within the Nazi regime, perhaps even Hitler himself, had knowledge of the plan. If successful, it would present Germany as seeking peace, shifting blame for continued war onto Britain. If it failed, Hess could be disavowed as unstable, a narrative that indeed unfolded. Adding to the intrigue is the response from the British side. Hess was taken into custody and held in solitary confinement. His mission was never publicized in detail during the war. Churchill dismissed him as a madman, and no official peace negotiations followed. But the secrecy surrounding his imprisonment and the deliberate quieting of the entire event has led some to speculate. Was there more to the message he carried? Files related to Hess's flight remain classified for decades. Several have still not been released in full. Those who have seen them describe contents that are diplomatically sensitive. Even now, what could a flight in 1941 contain that remains dangerous to disclose? There are also questions about Hess's mental state, though he was later declared fit to stand trial at Nuremberg. His erratic behavior and memory lapses during the proceedings raised doubts. Was it trauma, illness, or, as some suspect, the result of prolonged psychological manipulation during his captivity? And perhaps the most haunting chapter of the story came much later. After the war, Hess was sentenced to life imprisonment at Spandau prison in Berlin. He became the facility's sole inmate for over 2 decades. In 1987, at the age of 93, he was found dead, hanged by an extension cord in a garden house on prison grounds. The official cause was suicide, but inconsistencies in the scene, bruising on his body, the awkward method of hanging, and conflicting witness reports led his family and some investigators to believe he was murdered, silenced before he could speak freely in a changing political climate. But murdered by whom? And for what? Was there a secret in his head carried since that lonely flight across the North Sea that someone wanted buried forever? The truth may be as scattered as the wind patterns over the Scottish hills. Some believe Hess was a deluded idealist acting out a personal fantasy of diplomacy. Others insist he was a key player in a covert mission that failed and whose implications are still too dangerous to fully reveal. The messy Rashmid he flew was recovered, the flight path confirmed. His landing, arrest, and long imprisonment are all matters of record, but the why behind it all remains elusive. Was it truly the act of a madman, or a thread that, if pulled, might unravel a secret history of negotiations, betrayals, and wartime agendas that history was never meant to remember? And in the silence of Spondo, behind the eyes of a man who sat alone for over 40 years, what truths may have remained unspoken until the end, as Rudolf Hess parachuted into the Scottish countryside in one of the war's most confounding solo missions? Another operation half a world away was unfolding in absolute secrecy, one that would remain hidden behind redacted files, unspoken agendas, and one of the most tragic maritime disasters in US naval history. This is the story of the USS Indianapolis and the mystery that still clings to its final mission. She was a heavy cruiser, sleek, fast, and formidable. Commissioned in 1932, the USS Indianapolis CA-35 served with distinction throughout the Pacific Theater. But it was in the summer of 1945, in the war's final days, that she took on a mission shrouded in silence. On July 16th, the Indianapolis departed San Francisco on a top-secret assignment. Her destination, Tinian Island in the Western Pacific. Her cargo, a set of carefully packed containers, unlabeled, guarded, and understood only by a select few. In reality, the contents were components for Little Boy, the atomic bomb that would be dropped on Hiroshima just weeks later. The Indianapolis completed her delivery in record time. But what happened next would plunge the ship and her crew into infamy. After unloading her cargo, the Indianapolis was sent west toward the Philippines without escort. No submarine screen, no air cover, no warning. On July 30th, in the dead of night, she was struck by 2 torpedoes from the Japanese submarine I-58. Within minutes, the cruiser was sinking beneath the waves. Of the nearly 1,200 men aboard, around 300 went down with the ship. The remaining 900 were left stranded in the open ocean, scattered, injured, and adrift under a blazing sun, and no one came. For nearly 5 days, they floated in the sweltering sea. Dehydration, exposure, and shark attacks thinned their numbers. By the time a routine patrol aircraft spotted the survivors by sheer chance, only 316 men remained. It was the worst disaster at sea in the history of the US Navy, but for many, the tragedy is only half the story. The other half lies in what the Indianapolis was truly doing, and why so many warning signs were ignored. Why was a ship of such strategic importance, one that had just delivered critical components for the most destructive weapon ever built, left to sail unescorted through hostile waters? The Navy later claimed a series of communication failures, that her route was not reported properly, that distress calls were misunderstood or ignored. But internal investigations would reveal contradictions, cover-ups, and an alarming lack of urgency from command. Some files remained classified for decades, others were quietly revised, and in the shadows of these bureaucratic failures, a darker theory emerged. Was the Indianapolis sacrificed? Some researchers have suggested that her movements were deliberately obscured, not by accident but by design, that in the final days of the war, as the atomic project reached its climax, those at the highest levels were determined to keep the bomb's logistics hidden at any cost. A cruiser drawing too much attention or running the risk of being captured might have been deemed expendable once her delivery was complete. Could such a decision have been made? Then there's the matter of her. Captain Charles B. McVeigh III, though he survived the sinking, he was later court-martialed, the only US Navy captain in World War II to be tried for losing his ship in combat. He was charged with hazarding his vessel by failing to zigzag, a maneuver meant to deter submarine attack. Never mind that the Navy itself had ordered zigzagging optional in certain conditions, or that the commander of the Japanese submarine that sank the Indianapolis testified that zigzagging would have made no difference. In 1968, after years of personal torment and public shaming, McVeigh took his own life. Only in 2000, decades after his death, was he posthumously exonerated by Congress. The decision acknowledged that he had been wrongly blamed, scapegoated for a disaster rooted in failures far above his rank. So again we ask, what was the real mission of the USS Indianapolis? Officially, she delivered components of the atomic bomb. But why did the Navy act with such speed and such silence?
Why did they leave her vulnerable?
And what, if anything, was she truly carrying? Some survivors hinted that not all of the cargo was unloaded at Tinian, that certain crates remained aboard after departure. Others claimed strange restrictions were placed on access to parts of the ship during the voyage.
Unusual even for wartime protocol.
And while most accounts focus on the atomic payload, others believe the Indianapolis may have also been transporting classified scientific materials, communication equipment, or even early forms of radioactive isotopes for further research. Contents that have never been fully confirmed or denied. The exact nature of her cargo and orders remain veiled behind the broader history of the Manhattan Project, a program still shadowed by secrecy even in the modern era. What we do know is this: the USS Indianapolis carried more than weapons. She carried a secret. And when her duty was done, she vanished. First into the depths, then into silence. Was it tragedy, negligence, or something more carefully orchestrated? And as the ocean slowly gave up her wreckage, discovered only in 2017, lying quiet at the bottom of the Philippine Sea, we are left to wonder what else lies down there, unspoken, unexplained,
and unreovered. And in the story of the Indianapolis,
what part of the truth still hasn't surfaced? As the wreck of the USS Indianapolis settled silently into the abyss, her final mission forever veiled in secrecy. Another kind of silence was breaking across the airwaves and across borders. This was a war not of ships or bombs, but of signals, of hidden voices carried by static, of coded messages whispered into the void. This is the mystery of the numbers stations, radio broadcasts that even today defy clear explanation. The scene is deceptively simple. Somewhere in the world, on an old shortwave radio, a dial is turned. A burst of white noise crackles through. Then abruptly, a voice. 371982. The voice is mechanical, detached. Sometimes male, sometimes female, often with a strange accent. It may repeat a single phrase or recite long strings of numbers broken into careful groups. Sometimes it's preceded by a jingle, a burst of music, or a code word like attention or ready, then silence. These broadcasts have been heard since World War II, though their origins are elusive. During the height of the conflict, amateur radio operators across Europe reported strange transmissions on shortwave bands. They didn't match any known military code or civilian pattern. The voices were often robotic, emotionless, repeating cryptic sequences of numbers, letters, or tones. At first, they were dismissed as atmospheric anomalies or errors in foreign communications, but the pattern persisted. More signals emerged, and over time the number of these transmissions only grew. They came from every corner of the world. Russia, Cuba, East Germany, the UK, even the United States. Always on shortwave, always in plain view, and always unreadable. But one thing became increasingly clear. Someone was listening, and someone knew exactly what they meant. The most widely accepted theory is that number stations were used by intelligence agencies to communicate with field agents, covert operatives deployed behind enemy lines. The system, if true, was brilliant in its simplicity. Shortwave radio travels vast distances. A tiny, inexpensive receiver could pick up a message across continents. And the encoded numbers, if interpreted with a one-time pad cipher, would be nearly impossible to crack without the corresponding key. No phone lines, no digital trails, just a voice and a sequence. During World War II, it's believed the British Special Operations Executive used number sequences to coordinate with resistance fighters across Nazi-occupied Europe. German intelligence too is thought to have relied on similar methods, as did the Soviet NKVD and later the KGB. But here's the strange part.
They never stopped.
Even after the war ended, the voices continued through the Cold War, the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and into the 21st century. Some stations vanished, others appeared. New voices emerged, speaking in Czech, German, Spanish, Chinese, and some are still broadcasting today in the era of encrypted emails and satellites. Why? What mission could be so enduring, so discreet, that it still relies on a decades-old analog method? Some researchers have mapped their schedules, catalogued their frequencies, and even given them names: the Lincolnshire Poacher, the Swedish Rhapsodity, the Russian Buzzer, and the infamous attention station believed to originate in Cuba. But no government has ever officially confirmed their purpose. Requests under the Freedom of Information Act often return with little or no data, and attempts to triangulate the exact origins of some signals have led only to anonymous facilities, off-limits to the public, or military zones shielded from scrutiny. So, the mystery deepens. Were all of these stations truly military, or could some have belonged to rogue groups, rival factions, or private contractors operating in the post-war shadows? In the chaos of World War II and its aftermath, intelligence networks often ran parallel, sometimes even in conflict. Could some stations have belonged to underground efforts we still know nothing about? And what of the stranger theories? There are those who believe number stations may have once been used for psychological operations, disinformation broadcast into enemy territory, or even subtle triggers for pre-programmed agents. Others point to oddities in certain broadcasts: background noises that don't match the message, codes that repeat without variation for years, or sudden disruptions that suggest something unscripted, something. One particularly chilling theory suggests that some stations may not be active at all, but automated relics running long after their creators disappeared. Forgotten systems that continue to call out, never knowing no one is left to answer. What do we make of a voice that repeats the same pattern for 20 years? Who is the audience?
And what happens if someone somewhere still knows how to listen?
Today, shortwave enthusiasts continue to record and archive these transmissions. Some have logged thousands of hours of broadcasts. Patterns emerge, disappear, return again. Stations go silent for years, then resume as if nothing changed. And in each message, each flat, emotionless voice reading strings of numbers, there's a lingering question. Is this a signal to someone or a signal from a past that refuses to let go? The war may be over, but the signals still drift through the static, unclaimed, unexplained, and perhaps still alive. From the invisible voices of numbers stations whispering through the airwaves, we now follow a mystery that emerges not from sound, but from stone, salt, and sea. Where the war's end may not have meant disappearance, but relocation. Thousands of miles from Berlin, far beyond the reach of Allied warplanes and tribunals, a stretch of rugged coastline winds along Argentina's Patagonian shore. It is a place of raw, elemental beauty, windswept cliffs, dense forest, and an ocean that swells against dark, unmarked rocks. And tucked among these cliffs, stories still circulate of secret harbors, of hidden structures, and of German U-boat that slipped silently from the Atlantic and into another life entirely. This is the enduring mystery of the Nazi U-boat base in Argentina. The story begins not at the height of the war, but near its end. On July 10, 1945, more than 2 months after Germany's official surrender, the German submarine U-530 surfaced off the coast of Mar del Plata. Argentina, its crew, surrendered to the Argentine Navy, battered, thin, but intact. They offered no clear explanation for their delay in surrender, no documentation, and most curiously, no captain. Otto Vermuth, the U-boat's commander, was missing. Then just weeks later, on August 17th, another German sub U-977 appeared in almost the same location. Once again, the crew was taken into custody. Once again, no solid answers were given. These were not isolated events. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Argentine fishermen and coastal villagers reported sightings of shadowy submarines surfacing at night, unloading cargo or people before vanishing beneath the waves. Some claimed to see figures in dark uniforms moving quickly along the beaches, disappearing into the dense interior. Others described secret construction in the coastal forests, reinforced doors in the cliffside, concrete foundations with no clear origin, or supply drops conducted in silence. The Argentine government at the time, sympathetic to many Axis refugees, conducted only minimal investigations.
Records were sparse.
Some were later lost, but questions lingered. What were these U-boat doing so far south, so late in the war?
Officially, they were stragglers.
Crews unwilling to surrender until absolutely necessary, but skeptics believe there's more to the story. Why did U-530 jettison its deck gun and all logs before arriving? Why did U-977 allegedly travel over 60 days submerged, an extraordinary feat, even with the advanced capabilities of a Type 7 submarine? And why did both crews speak in vague, evasive terms about their journey? One explanation points to an organized escape network, a rat line created by remnants of the Nazi regime in the final months of the war. As Allied forces closed in on Europe, high-ranking officials and select scientists are believed to have fled across the Atlantic using various means, including disguised U-boat. Their destination, South America, where sympathetic regimes, false identities, and remote terrain offered both refuge and anonymity. Argentina, in particular, became a known haven for former Nazis in the post-war era. Figures such as Adolf Eichmann, Isef Mengele, and Erich Pripke lived in Argentina for years, even decades, under assumed names, often with little interference. It is not unreasonable to suggest that some may have arrived by sea. In 2009, a team of Argentine archaeologists began surveying a remote area near Toto, a sparsely populated zone of Patagonian coastline. They discovered concrete structures partially buried with foundations far stronger than any known local buildings. Inside they found German coins dating to the 1940s, along with fragments of imported ceramic and items bearing Third Reich insignia, while the ruins could be explained as post-war buildings or forgotten ranch infrastructure. The materials, many not native to Argentina, raised eyebrows. Was this the remnant of a clandestine base? Satellite imagery has also revealed strange geometric shapes carved into the terrain, patterns inconsistent with agricultural use, yet too regular to be natural. Some researchers suggest they may have been landing sites or coded markers visible from the air or sea. And yet, despite decades of rumors, no definitive evidence has emerged of a formal U-boat base.
No tunnel has been confirmed. No submarine hangar uncovered.
Just fragments, hints, silhouettes in the coastal fog. Some claim that's exactly the point. If the base was real, it was never meant to be found, built not as a military installation, but as a temporary staging ground, a place to deliver fugitives and cargo before dissolving into the landscape. A ghost base, a waypoint on a longer journey. Others dismissed the theory entirely, suggesting that any U-boat sightings were exaggerated and that the remnants found are misinterpreted or coincidental. That the idea of a Nazi U-boat base in Argentina is more myth than mystery. But the question remains, why did those submarines surface there at that time so far from the theatre of war?
What were they carrying?
And more importantly, who? To this day, no full accounting of U-boat traffic in the South Atlantic has been released. Naval records from both German and Allied archives remain incomplete, and Argentina, while more open than in decades past, still holds portions of its wartime records under seal. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere offshore, resting in deep waters where salt erases memory. Or perhaps along that lonely coast where the wind still carries whispers through the cliffs. There are ruins buried under decades of silence that once sheltered the war's final exiles. And if those walls could speak, what stories of passage, of secrecy, of survival might they finally reveal? As we leave behind the windswept cliffs of Patagonia and the whispered legends of U-boat arriving in the dark, we now step into a space that is quieter still, but no less haunting. A place where plans were made, orders drafted, and the fate of hundreds of thousands may have balanced on a decision that was never fully explained. This is the story of the third atomic bomb, the one that was built, armed, and ready to fall, but never released. We all know what happened on August 6, 1945, when little boy fell over Hiroshima, and again 3 days later when Fat Man exploded over Nagasaki. Those two bombings changed the world. But what's less known is that there was a third weapon fully assembled, awaiting delivery, and set to be used within days of the second drop. And then, without warning, it vanished from history. The bomb known in internal records as Fat Man Mark III No. 3 was not theoretical. It was real. Components had already been transported to Tinian Island, where the previous two missions had originated. Plutonium cores were being processed at Los Alamos, and eyewitness accounts confirmed that a third plutonium implosion bomb was slated for use no later than August 19, 1945, the intended target. That's where things begin to blur. Some sources suggest Kokura, which had already been the primary target for the second bombing before weather forced the crew to redirect toward Nagasaki. Others point to Niigata, a city with industrial significance and a large oil refinery. A few even suggest Tokyo, though bombing the political heart of Japan with an atomic weapon was widely considered a step too far, even in war. But what remains most compelling is not where the bomb was meant to fall, but why it didn't. Japan formally surrendered on August 15, 1945, announced by Emperor Hirohito in a crackling radio broadcast that echoed through the ruins of a war-torn nation. And while the surrender brought relief, it also raised immediate questions inside military circles. Was the third bomb delayed because of diplomacy or something else? Some historians argue that the pace of events simply overtook the timeline. After Nagasaki, Japan's internal debates over surrender intensified, accelerated by the Soviet Union's entry into the Pacific conflict and the rapid collapse of defensive lines in Manchuria. From that perspective, the third bomb wasn't cancelled. It was merely overtaken by circumstance. But others aren't convinced. Official documents released decades later show that General Leslie Groves, head of the Manhattan Project, had already issued orders to prepare additional atomic bombs for deployment, potentially up to 7 by the end of 1945. Factories in Oak Ridge and Hanford were working around the clock. In this context, the third bomb was not the end of a plan. It was just the beginning. So why stop? Some point to internal resistance within the US government and scientific community. Several Manhattan Project scientists, including those at Los Alamos, had begun expressing concerns about further use of the bomb, especially after seeing its effects. There are records of moral appeals sent to military leadership, and even President Truman urging restraint. Did one of these appeals find its mark? Or was the decision driven by something less idealistic? Perhaps the realization that Japan's surrender offered a perfect demonstration of American nuclear superiority without risking the political fallout of a third strike. Then there's the issue of what happened to the third bomb itself. Some records suggest it was disassembled and its core reused in later testing. Others imply that the weapon, or at least part of it, remained intact for some time, stored, hidden, or possibly shipped back to the continental United States. A few researchers claim it was part of Operation Crossroads, the first post-war nuclear test at Bikini Atoll in 1946, but no document has ever definitively traced the full path of that third device. The gap in documentation is curious. The Manhattan Project was meticulous. Logs, transfers, even verbal communications were often recorded. And yet, the paper trail for the third bomb ends abruptly in August 1945. Could it have been hidden for political reasons? Some speculate that the bomb's existence was deliberately obscured to maintain the narrative of decisive action and closure, that a third detonation, especially if deployed, might have eroded the fragile moral justification presented in the wake of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are even fringe theories suggesting that a third bomb was transported covertly as part of a contingency operation in case Japan failed to surrender or attempted a coup against the Emperor's declaration, that it may have been loaded onto a transport aircraft only to be recalled mid-flight. But no flight logs, pilot testimonies, or physical evidence have ever confirmed such a mission. What remains then is absence. A weapon built in secret, transported across oceans, prepared for use, and then forgotten. What does this silence mean? Was it a moment of mercy in a war that knew so little of it? A logistical oversight turned into a historical reprieve, or a truth carefully withheld to control the shape of memory? The third bomb was real. That much is certain, but everything else, its destination, its cancellation, its aftermath, remains caught in the fog of wartime secrecy and political aftermath. And so we are left to wonder what would have happened had the third bomb fallen. What cities were spared not by strategy or surrender, but by timing, chance, or conscience? And if its pieces still exist, stored in some forgotten bunker or buried in the archives of history, what story would they tell if we dared to listen? As we close the chapter on the third atomic bomb that was never dropped, a weapon built but never detonated, we now follow a different kind of detonation. One not heard as a blast, but felt as a shock across war rooms, exile governments, and secret files. This is the story of a man whose death came not on the battlefield, but from the sky, whose final descent, like the silence that followed it, still raises questions that no official record has ever fully answered. This is the mystery of General Władysław Sikorski, leader of the Polish government in exile during World War II, and a man whose untimely end remains a puzzle of political intrigue, betrayal, and shadow diplomacy. It was the night of July 4th, 1943, and the sun had just set over the Rock of Gibraltar, that steep ancient bastion at the edge of the Mediterranean, where Britain's military presence clung tightly to a strategic crossroads of empire and war. Sikorski, returning from an inspection tour of Polish forces stationed in the Middle East, boarded a B-24 Liberator, an American-built aircraft operated by the Royal Air Force. Alongside him were members of his staff, his daughter Zofia, and his Polish Chief of Staff. The plane lifted off without incident, but just moments later, mere seconds into the flight, it plunged into the sea. Of the 17 people on board, all but one died. The only survivor was the Czech pilot, Flight Lieutenant Edward Pashau, who, though injured, managed to escape the wreckage. Sikorski's body was recovered hours later from the sea. His daughter's body was never found. The British launched an investigation. The official verdict: mechanical failure. The aircraft's elevator controls had jammed, rendering the pilot unable to lift the nose and keep the plane airborne. A tragic accident, they said, but even then many weren't convinced. The evidence seemed thin. No prior issues with the aircraft had been reported. The pilot, though injured, had no clear memory of the exact failure. And in the chaotic aftermath of the crash, no complete forensic examination of the wreckage was ever made public. The plane was quickly retrieved and its remains examined behind closed doors. Rumors spread that the aircraft had been tampered with, that wires had been cut, that this was not a failure but an act of deliberate sabotage. Why would someone want Sikorski dead? To answer that, we must understand who he was. General Sikorski was not just a figurehead. He was the commander-in-chief of Polish forces and the prime minister of the Polish government in exile based in London. He was widely respected among the Allies, but he was also fiercely independent and deeply committed to exposing what had happened to tens of thousands of Polish officers taken prisoner by the Soviets in 1939 and never seen Again, in April 1943, just months before Sikorsky's death, the Cotton Forest Massacre was discovered by German troops. Over 20,000 Polish military officers, intellectuals, and leaders had been executed, shot in the back of the head, and buried in mass graves. The Germans accused the Soviet NKVD of the atrocity. The Soviets denied it, blaming the Nazis. Sikorsky demanded a full investigation. He wanted answers. He called on the Red Cross to intervene, and he refused to retract his accusation, even as pressure from both Stalin and Churchill mounted. And so just weeks after that stand, after refusing to remain silent, Sikorsky's plane fell into the sea. Coincidence? Some believe it was a warning, others a silencing.
Theories abound.
Some suspect the Soviets, desperate to remove a vocal critic and maintain the fragile wartime alliance with the Western Allies. Could they have infiltrated Gibraltar, tampered with the plane, and eliminated a problem under the cover of darkness? Others point fingers at the British themselves, arguing that Churchill, though personally fond of Sikorsky, may have seen his stubbornness as a threat to Allied unity. With the invasion of Europe approaching, any disruption to the alliance with Stalin, however justified, was politically dangerous. There are even those who suggest internal Polish betrayal. Not all factions within the exile government agreed with Sikorsky's approach to Soviet relations. Some saw him as too moderate, too idealistic, too willing to compromise with Western powers they no longer trusted. And what of the pilot? Flight Lieutenant Purchell, the sole survivor, maintained for decades that the crash was an accident, but his survival, while every other passenger perished, has fueled suspicions. Some have questioned the consistency of his statements over the years. Others claim his military files were altered or sanitized. In 2008, Sikorsky's remains were exhumed from War Cathedral in Kov for a new forensic examination. Polish investigators found no conclusive evidence of foul play, no traces of poison, no signs of gunshot wounds or pre-mortem injuries. Yet even this, rather than solving the mystery, left it suspended in uncertainty. If it was sabotage, it left no fingerprints. If it was an accident, it was too perfect. And so we ask, was General Sikorsky's death simply the cruel luck of war, or the final move in a hidden game of alliances, secrets, and silenced truths? The waves off Gibraltar have long since calmed, but beneath them, perhaps a piece of history remains, untouched, waiting for a current strong enough to carry it to the surface. Until then, we are left with fragments. A plane that fell, a voice that vanished, and a question that history still refuses to answer. As the mystery of General Sikorsky's doomed flight fades into the twilight over Gibraltar, we turn our gaze further south, into a landscape even more desolate, more unforgiving, and just as reluctant to give up its secrets. The Libyan desert, part of the Greater Sahara, stretches endlessly beneath the unforgiving African sun. Shimmering heat distorts the horizon. Wind howls softly across the sand, moving grains that haven't shifted in decades. In this silent ocean of dunes and stone, something once stirred the stillness, something metallic, abandoned, and unnaturally intact. A lone B-24 Liberator bomber, half buried in sand but eerily preserved by the desert's arid air. A World War II ghost plane discovered by chance in 1958, more than 15 years after it vanished. Its name was painted in neat, fading letters on the fuselage, Lady Be Good, April 4, 1943. The bomber departed from Solok Airfield near Benghazi on its very first combat mission, a high-altitude bombing run over Naples, Italy. The crew of 9 were young, mostly in their early 20s. For most of them, it was their first and only mission. They never returned. Lady Be Good was declared missing in action, presumed lost over the Mediterranean during the return flight. No distress calls were received. No wreckage was found in the chaos of war. The incident faded quickly into the ever-growing list of unexplained losses. But the desert remembered. In 1958, a British oil exploration team stumbled upon the wreck, while flying over a remote section of the Libyan sands. What they saw stunned even seasoned explorers. The aircraft lay almost perfectly preserved. No signs of fire or combat damage. Guns were still in place, radios intact. Even thermoses of coffee, rusted yet sealed, sat undisturbed in the cockpit. It was as if the lady had simply landed and waited. Yet, there was no sign of the crew. Investigators later pieced together a sobering truth. The plane, returning from its mission, had overshot its base during the night, likely due to a faulty navigation system and poor visibility. Thinking they were still over the sea, the crew had bailed out, believing a water landing was imminent. But instead of ocean, they drifted silently down into the vastness of the Sahara. The bomber, meanwhile, continued flying on autopilot for nearly 16 more miles before crash landing gracefully into the sand. In subsequent years, 8 of the 9 crew members were eventually found, mummified by the heat, scattered across miles of desert. They had survived the parachute jump, but without a clear sense of direction, they walked north in search of help, covering over 100 miles before the desert claimed them. Yet one body was never found. Sergeant Vernon Moore, the plane's tail gunner, remains missing to this day. And with that absence, a door remains open not just to tragedy, but to mystery. Why was the plane so intact? How did it remain undetected for so long in an era of expanding aerial surveillance? Could there have been something aboard, documents, equipment, or intelligence that never made it into the official reports? More speculative theories emerged, as they often do when the known becomes too neat. Some suggested the aircraft had a secondary mission, perhaps involving clandestine surveillance or secret cargo. The pristine condition of the plane and the apparent lack of effort to recover it after the war raised questions in certain circles. Others fixated on the eerie detail of the crew's journals, fragments recovered from the wreck and from their bodies. Some pages hinted at confusion, shifting shadows on the dunes, and whispered phrases that spoke of unease. Did the heat and dehydration warp their minds? Or did they encounter something in that endless desert that left no record? The Libyan desert, after all, is home to its own myths, echoing voices, phantom lights, ancient structures buried and forgotten. Could the Lady Be Good have drifted too close to something meant to remain hidden? Even the aircraft itself became something of a haunted relic. After its discovery, pieces of the bomber were removed and shipped back to the United States for analysis. Some parts were reused, installed in other aircraft still in service, and curiously, several of those planes later suffered accidents or mechanical failures, leading some to call the lady's remnants cursed. Is it coincidence, or did something cling to the metal, something left behind not by war, but by the desert itself? Today the wreck has mostly vanished again. Sandstorms and time have buried what remains. A few parts are held in museums. Others were lost in transit or quietly disappeared into private collections. The full airframe no longer rests in one piece, but the story remains whole.
Lady Be Good is more than a tale of navigational error or wartime tragedy.
It's a testament to isolation, endurance, and the strange preservation of time in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. And it leaves us with the question not easily answered. What else lies beneath those sands, waiting for the wind to shift just enough to be seen again? What voices are still carried in the silence of the desert? And did the lady, in her final descent, stumble across a secret she was never meant to see? As the winds of the Sahara buried the last traces of Lady Be Good beneath shifting dunes halfway across the world, another strange relic of World War II was already drifting on the wind high above the Pacific, silent, unseen, and bound for a continent unprepared for its arrival. These were not planes, not missiles, not fleets. They were balloons, but not the kind meant for celebration. These were weapons, deadly, experimental, and nearly forgotten. They were called Fugo, fire balloons, and they carried with them a mystery that to this day remains suspended between history and speculation. The first one landed in the United States in November 1944. No one saw it coming. Across a remote stretch of forest near Thermopolis, Wyoming, a strange object was found tangled in the trees. It was a balloon of unfamiliar design, delicate yet engineered with precision. Beneath it hung a payload, a small but deadly incendiary device. Local authorities were baffled. Then another was found, and another. One in Montana, one in Oregon, even as far east as Michigan. What were they? Where had they come from? And how could they have possibly crossed 5,000 miles of open ocean undetected? The answer, it turned out, lay in the skies above Japan, and in one of the boldest and most curious operations of the Second World War in late 1944, as the tide of the war turned against the Axis, the Japanese military conceived a plan as desperate as it was inventive. With their navy crippled and no long-range bombers capable of reaching the US mainland, they turned to the jet stream, a newly discovered high-altitude air current capable of carrying lightweight objects across the Pacific in just a few days. The project was named Fugo, or Code Weapon 32. It was simple in concept, yet technically
remarkable. Nearly 10,000 balloons constructed from rice paper and
rubberized silk were released from hidden launch sites in Honshu. Each was 33 feet in diameter, filled with hydrogen, and equipped with a sophisticated altitude control system that used barometers and sandbag ballast to keep it stable at 30,000 helaf. Attached beneath were bombs, incendiary devices meant to ignite forest fires and cause panic across North America. But there was more to it than that. Some historians believe the campaign's deeper objective was psychological warfare, to instill fear, to prove Japan could still strike the US homeland. And in this it achieved eerie success. Although only a small percentage of the balloons are confirmed to have reached North America, their impact, both literal and symbolic, was real. Some caused minor fires. One disrupted power lines near the Manhattan Project's secret facility in Hanford, Washington. And tragically, in May 1945, a balloon exploded in Blee, Oregon, killing a pastor's wife and 5 children on a church picnic. The only civilians to die on the US mainland due to enemy action during World War II, but here's where the mystery deepens. Out of the nearly 10,000 Fugo balloons launched, fewer than 300 were ever recovered. Where did the rest go? Did they disintegrate in mid-air, sink into the ocean, or land silently in forests, deserts, and mountains never to be found? Some believe many may still lie undiscovered, slowly decaying in remote wilderness areas. Others suspect that some might have been classified or quietly neutralized, especially if they were found near sensitive military sites. And there are darker theories too. A few researchers claim that select balloons carried not just firebombs, but more dangerous payloads, biological agents, possibly anthrax or plague. No confirmed evidence supports this, but the idea is not far-fetched. Japan's infamous Unit 731 had already experimented with biological warfare in China. Could the Fugo program have been part of a broader, more secretive initiative? Then there's the question of the balloon's engineering. The control mechanisms, entirely mechanical, were surprisingly advanced, using nothing but barometric pressure and a timed release system. They maintained altitude over thousands of miles, descending only when the final sandbags were dropped. Some crashed into trees in pristine condition.
Others left impact craters as if they'd struck with unnatural force.
In the chaos of wartime, their existence was kept secret for months. The US government, fearing mass panic, issued strict censorship orders. Newspapers were forbidden from reporting the landings. Even after the war, the full scale of the Fugo campaign wasn't widely known, but the silence didn't erase the evidence. Decades later, hikers in the Pacific Northwest stumbled across strange metallic fragments half buried beneath pine needles. Farmers uncovered rusted balloon components in Kansas wheat fields. And in 2014, 70 years after launch, a live Fugo bomb was discovered by loggers in British Columbia. It had to be detonated by a military disposal team. How many more remain, waiting silently beneath the soil? The Fugo balloons are a strange footnote in World War II, a blend of desperation, ingenuity, and eerie persistence. They drifted across oceans and decades, guided by the winds, almost forgotten but not quite. And they leave us with a question that resists easy answers. What do we make of a weapon carried by the sky itself? One that kills without warning and leaves no enemy behind.
Are the last echoes of this operation still drifting somewhere unseen?
Or have we merely uncovered the fragments while the true purpose remains tethered to a silence only the wind understands? As Japan's Fugo balloons drifted silently over North America, threatening destruction with mechanisms powered only by air and precision, far across the Atlantic, another silent battle was unfolding. This one not in the skies, but in the minds of men locked in a war of symbols, ciphers, and secrets. In the English countryside, veiled by fog and war, stood an unassuming mansion. Bletchley Park, a quiet estate of red brick and ivy. It could easily be mistaken for a country retreat until you stepped inside. Here the walls echoed not with artillery but with the frantic tapping of typewriters, the hum of analytical machines, and the sharp scratch of pencils decoding patterns that could change the fate of nations. It was here that the Allies broke one of the most sophisticated cryptographic systems the world had ever known, the Enigma machine. But how they did it, and how much they really knew, remains a puzzle unto itself. The Enigma machine was elegant in its complexity. Developed by the Germans in the 1920s and adopted by the Nazi military in the 1930s, it used a series of rotating rotors and electrical circuits to scramble messages into an ever-shifting code. Each keystroke transformed a letter into something unrecognizable, and with more than 150 quintillion possible settings, the odds of cracking a single message seemed hopeless.
Unless you had help, and the Allies did.
But who exactly helped first? The commonly accepted narrative begins in Poland, where brilliant mathematicians like Marian Revsky, working at the Bureau Chiffro in the early 1930s, were the first to deduce how the Enigma worked. They built replicas, bomber cryptologics, and machines to simulate rotor settings and decode intercepted transmissions. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, the Poles shared their secrets with the British and French. The story then shifts to Alan Turing and his team at Bletchley Park, where the famous bomb machine, an electromechanical marvel, was refined to automate the decryption process. It's a tidy story, one of cooperation, intelligence, and innovation. But like so much in war, the truth may be more complicated, because even now, nearly a century later, questions remain. How early did the British actually break the Enigma? Some declassified documents suggest that British intelligence might have been intercepting and possibly reading segments of German encrypted traffic even before 1939.
And if so, how much did they know?
And what did they allow to happen to keep their secrets safe? There are whispers, some supported, some speculative, that the Allies deliberately allowed certain attacks, including bombing raids and convoy sinkings, to go unchallenged so as not to alert the Germans that Enigma had been compromised. Is it true? Would the lives of hundreds, even thousands, have been traded for a greater strategic advantage? And then there is the mysterious U-boat transmission. In 1942, German U-boats were wreaking havoc in the Atlantic, sinking Allied ships with impunity. The Enigma used for naval communication, known as Triton or the Shark cipher, was more complex than previous versions, incorporating an extra rotor. For months, Bletchley Park was blind. Then, suddenly, the code was broken just days after the British recovered codebooks from a damaged U-boat. Or so the story goes. But some question the timing. Was the breakthrough solely due to the captured materials, or had the Allies found another way? Something never disclosed, perhaps involving signals intelligence, espionage, or even a betrayal within the German command. Further adding to the enigma of Enigma is the story of the OVARE, Germany's military intelligence service. Historians have long debated whether elements within the OB suspected their codes were compromised. Some suggest they fed disinformation through Enigma channels as a counterintelligence tactic. If so, were the Allies always one step ahead? Or were they occasionally being played? And why for so long did the secret of Bletchley Park remain buried? Until the 1970s, the very existence of the Enigma operation was unknown to the public. Veterans who had worked there were bound by strict oaths of silence. Some died never revealing what they had done.
Why such secrecy for so long?
Was it merely to protect Cold War-era cryptographic methods? Or were there deeper, more uncomfortable truths hidden beneath the heroism? There are even suggestions, rarely discussed in mainstream history, that the Allies may have gained more than just wartime advantage from the Enigma interception. Some conspiracy theorists propose that certain intercepted communications included references to secret weapons, advanced science, even unknown technologies smuggled or traded during the chaos of the final months of the war. There is no hard proof, only gaps. Unexplained silences, redacted pages, and a growing sense that for every message decrypted, something else was carefully encrypted in its place. This time, not by machine, but by human hands and historical memory. And so the question lingers, did we truly break Enigma? Or did we merely uncover the parts we were allowed to see? Bletchley Park today is a museum. Its halls open to the public, its secrets on display in glass cases, but the real secret, how deep the code reading went. How much was truly sacrificed or hidden to preserve the advantage may still remain locked away in archives, sealed beneath layers of classification, or perhaps lost to time altogether. And if so, one wonders what messages were never meant to be read, and what truths still lie between the lines, hidden in the shadows of the world's greatest cipher. As the dust of war settled and the shattered remains of the Third Reich collapsed under Allied boots, the world turned a cautious eye toward peace. But in the shadows, far from the Nuremberg trials and public reckonings, another operation was already underway. One that would quietly shape the future of global power, science, and secrecy. Its name was Operation Paperclip. And though the files were stamped, classified, and buried in locked drawers deep within American intelligence agencies, what they contained would ignite decades of controversy, speculation, and fear. Picture a corridor beneath the Pentagon, its walls lined with cabinets no civilian has ever seen. Inside dossiers, immigration waivers, false identities, and contracts. Names that during the war were spoken with condemnation in Allied war rooms. Names tied to Nazi research facilities, V2 rocket programs, chemical weapons laboratories, even units with direct links to SS atrocities. Yet, these very individuals, once enemies of the state, were quietly funneled into the United States through a covert program meant not to punish, but to recruit. Officially, Operation Paperclip was a strategic initiative. Its goal to extract the scientific expertise of former Nazi engineers and physicists before the Soviet Union could claim them. In the emerging Cold War, knowledge was power, and the United States was determined not to fall behind. Among the most famous of these figures was Vera von Braun, the father of Nazi Germany's V2 rocket, and later the visionary behind NASA's Saturn V, which launched America to the moon. His talents were undeniable, but so were the allegations that he had overseen forced labor camps at Middle, where thousands died under inhuman conditions. Did justice take a backseat to progress? The official story tells us the Office of Strategic Services, precursor to the CIA, conducted thorough background checks, that only those without strong ties to war crimes were brought in, that the program, though morally complex, was necessary. But cracks in that narrative have long since emerged. Declassified documents slowly released over decades paint a murkier picture. Names once redacted now revealed individuals who were more than just passive scientists. Some were SS officers. Some had conducted inhumane experiments on prisoners. Others were never fully vetted at all. And yet they were granted US citizenship, awarded research positions, shielded from scrutiny under new identities. Why was it desperation to win the technological arms race or something deeper? In 1947, the US government created the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JA, a body tasked with sanitizing the records of Nazi recruits and rewriting their histories to make them acceptable. Documents were altered, backgrounds erased, war crimes overlooked, and here lies the true mystery, just how much was hidden. Not every paperclip file has been unsealed. Some remain classified to this day. Others were allegedly destroyed. Within those missing pages could lie answers to long-standing rumors that the US may have adopted more than just science, that elements of psychological warfare, unethical experimentation, even early mind control projects like MKUltra may have drawn influence directly or indirectly from these former enemies. And then there's the question of what was never written down at all. Some files mention special projects assigned to certain recruits, but the details are left blank. Others include redacted memos between high-ranking military officials suggesting internal disagreements. Some within the Pentagon warning that certain scientists were too dangerous to be trusted. Those warnings were ignored. Why? What did the United States see in these men that made their past irrelevant? What knowledge did they bring about rockets, medicine, or perhaps something far more clandestine that made their recruitment worth the risk? And what does it mean that we still don't know the full list of names? In recent years, journalists and historians have unearthed fragments, letters between officials, personal diaries, testimonies from survivors of Nazi programs who were stunned to learn that their former tormentors had been given sanctuary in the very country they believed had delivered them from tyranny. There's even speculation, never proven but persistent, that some of these paperclip scientists were involved in early experiments involving radiation exposure, chemical mind manipulation, and Cold War espionage technologies that remain beyond public understanding. Were these simply conspiracies born of paranoia, or are they whispers of a truth too uncomfortable to confront? Even today, the legacy of Operation Paperclip hangs heavy. Monuments and space programs bear the names of men whose roles in history have been carefully curated, celebrated for their achievements, their darker chapters quietly omitted. But the hidden files, they tell a different story, one not of scientific triumph alone, but of moral compromise, of lines crossed in the name of national interest, of secrets still sealed in vaults marked top secret, eyes only. And so we're left to wonder what else was hidden under the banner of Operation Paperclip. What buried truths remain behind closed doors? And in the pursuit of superiority, how much of the past did we willingly forget? The barren sea lies quiet now, its steel-grey surface rippling beneath a northern sky that rarely darkens in summer, yet never truly warms. Cold, vast, and unforgiving. This stretch of Arctic water holds secrets beneath its waves. Secrets that have drifted silently since the summer of 1942. This was the route of convoy PQ-17, a fleet of 35 merchant ships laden with vital war supplies bound for the Soviet Union. Tanks, trucks, aircraft, ammunition, an arsenal essential to keep the Eastern Front from collapsing under German pressure. Escorted by a formidable screen of British and American warships, PQ-17 represented not only military cooperation, but also a gamble threading through a region stalked by U-boat bombers, and perhaps most ominously, the German battleship Tirpitz, lurking like a shadow in the fjords of Norway. What happened next is officially recorded as a catastrophic military blunder. But some say the truth might be more complicated. On July 4, 1942, Admiral T in London received intercepted intelligence suggesting that the Tirpitz, Germany's most powerful battleship, was moving to intercept PQ-17. Panicked by the possibility of losing the entire fleet in one strike, the order was given. Scatter the convoy, escorts were withdrawn. The merchant ships were left to sail independently, vulnerable and alone. The results were devastating. Of the 35 merchant vessels, 24 were sunk. Thousands of tons of war material lost to the sea. More than 150 sailors perished. Survivors drifted in lifeboats for days under the midnight sun, tormented by cold and the endless daylight. The sea, it seemed, had swallowed them whole. But what if the story doesn't end there? Over the years, historians and naval researchers have examined the strange gaps in the operation's timeline. Why did British intelligence overestimate the movement of the TPX? German records later showed that the battleship never left port. Was the order to scatter based on faulty intelligence or deliberate misinformation? And if so, who benefited from that chaos? Some point to Ultra, the top-secret British code-reading program at Bletchley Park. Had the intelligence services truly decrypted German intentions? Or had the Germans fed them deliberate false signals through compromised channels? If Ultra was misled, then it would mark one of the few but most consequential instances where reliance on decrypted communications led to devastating misjudgment. Others whisper about political motives, that the failure of PQ-17 gave the British government leverage over future American involvement in Arctic convoys, or that the losses created a justification for withdrawing future convoys during a critical period in the Soviet campaign. It's a suggestion few dare to follow too far. The implications are uncomfortable. And then there are the missing ships. While many wrecks have been located on the seafloor, some vessels appear to have vanished entirely. No distress calls, no confirmed sinkings, no wreckage ever found. Could some of these ships have been diverted, captured? There were rumors, never substantiated, of 1 or 2 vessels being seized by German forces and towed to secret ports. Another theory, far more speculative, claims that at least one of the merchantmen carried more than just tanks and munitions, perhaps something far more sensitive. There are whispers, quiet, often dismissed, that a small crate labelled only with British government seals may have been among the cargo. What it contained remains unknown. A prototype, a secret. Communication device, a diplomatic exchange, nothing has ever been confirmed. And yet the records for several ships remain strangely incomplete. Cargo manifests lost, crew lists truncated. Some survivors reported cargo hold sealed under armed guard even before departure. One sailor interviewed decades later recalled hearing that his ship had carried something not for Russia, but he never saw it. He never knew, and perhaps he was never meant to. Even the decision-making process behind the scatter order remains contested. Some of the documents were withheld from public release for decades. Others are still redacted. Why the secrecy after all this time? Was it merely embarrassment over a tactical error? Or is there more beneath the surface? The barren sea remains, a graveyard, an underwater museum of twisted hulls and lost ambitions. Occasional expeditions return with sonar images, rusted anchors, fragmented stories. But the full truth of PQ-17 remains scattered like the convoy itself across time, ice, and official silence. So we are left to ask, was PQ-17 simply a tragic, wartime miscalculation, or did something more deliberate unfold in the frozen north? What secrets went down with those ships? And what truths still lie waiting, cold and undisturbed, on the ocean floor? The Baltic Sea, in the depth of winter, is a place of steel-grey silence. Ice grips the shoreline. Winds howl across the open water like ancient ghosts. And beneath the frigid waves, a forgotten tragedy sleeps, one far greater in scale than the Titanic, yet largely absent from history books. On January 30th, 1945, the German ship Wilhelm Gustloff slipped away from the port of Gotenhofen, fleeing the collapse of the Third Reich. It was meant to be a lifeline, part of Operation Hannibal, the largest seaborne evacuation in history. On board were more than 10,000 people, wounded soldiers, Nazi officials, and most of all, civilians. Thousands of women and children trying to escape the advancing Soviet forces. The ship was never designed for war. Once a symbol of Nazi propaganda, a luxury liner built to show off the promise of the regime, the Wilhelm Gustloff had been repurposed, overcrowded, and dimly lit. its elegance gone, replaced by desperation. People crammed into stairwells, engine rooms, even the swimming pool. What they carried with them was not luggage, but fear. Fear of what lay behind them and uncertainty about what lay ahead. Shortly after nightfall, as the Gustav moved slowly through the frozen darkness of the Baltic, it was spotted by Soviet submarine S-13 under the command of Captain Alexander Marinesko. 3 torpedoes were fired. All 3 struck their target. What followed was chaos. The first torpedo struck the crew quarters. The second hit the empty swimming pool where many women and children had sought shelter, and the third disabled the engine room. Within minutes, the ship began to list. Panic spread. Lifeboats were frozen to the deck. The cold was unbearable. People leapt into the sea, only to be pulled under by the ship's suction or overcome by the icy water. In less than an hour, the Wilhelm Gustav sank, taking with it an estimated 9,000 lives. It remains the deadliest maritime disaster in recorded history. And yet the story remains strangely silent. Why is it that such a massive loss of life is so rarely mentioned in World War II narratives? Was it overshadowed by the scale of the conflict, or was it intentionally obscured? Some historians suggest that the disaster was minimized in post-war narratives to avoid humanizing German suffering during the Nazi regime's downfall. Others point to the chaos of the Eastern Front. Millions were dying across Europe, and this single ship, horrific as its loss was, became just another shadow in the flood. But the mystery deepens. Was the Gustav merely a transport of civilians, or was it carrying something else? Some believe the ship may have been transporting high-ranking Nazi officials, gold reserves, or even classified documents. Rumors persist that certain compartments were sealed, guarded, and off-limits, even to the ship's officers. Survivors recalled strange military crates being loaded before departure under heavy protection. Could the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustav have been more than just an attack of opportunity? Was it a targeted mission not just to stop refugees, but to eliminate witnesses or erase evidence? Then there's the question of the submarine commander himself. Captain Marinesko had been under threat of court-martial for misconduct before the sinking, and his superiors initially refused to honor him for the attack. Why? If the sinking was such a military success, why the hesitation to recognize it? Was it because the Gustav was not just a ship, but something more complicated? Decades later, divers exploring the wreck found the remains of children in their life jackets still strapped to their tiny bodies. Others found sealed areas that could not be accessed without cutting through warped steel. The site has since been declared a war grave, largely unexplored, its secrets protected by depth, pressure, and politics. There's a quiet sorrow surrounding the story of the Wilhelm Gustav. It doesn't fit neatly into wartime heroism or villain. It is not a tale of strategy or triumph. It's a story of those forgotten by history, of lives lost in the margins, of questions that are perhaps too uncomfortable to answer. What was truly
Aboard that ship, who made the final decisions? And why has such a monumental disaster been kept in the shadows? We may never know.
The Baltic keeps its silence well, but the wreck still lies there beneath the waves, beneath the ice, beneath the silence, waiting. The Ural Mountains rise like a jagged scar across the heart of Russia, cold and defiant. In winter, they become an endless wilderness of snow-covered silence where even the wind seems to whisper secrets no one dares to tell. And deep within this frozen expanse lies a pass, lonely, remote, and forever stained by a mystery that refuses to fade. Datlov Pass. The name is infamous now. In February of 1959, 9 experienced Soviet hikers perished here under circumstances so bizarre, so disturbing, that even decades later, no official account has satisfied every question. Their tent was found torn open from the inside. Some fled into the night barefoot, wearing little more than underclothes despite sub-zero temperatures. Others had crushed ribs. One had her tongue missing. There were no signs of struggle, only confusion, only fear. But what if this horror didn't begin in 1959? What if the seeds of this enigma were sown years earlier during the final days of World War II? At first glance, the Dyatlov tragedy seems disconnected from the war. After all, it happened more than a decade later in the Soviet Union's post-war period. But a closer look reveals unsettling threads weaving a deeper, more intricate tapestry of secrecy and silence. Just north of where the hikers died was a military test range, classified at the time and heavily used during and after the war. Reports have emerged, long buried in declassified Soviet archives, of strange aerial phenomena observed in the area throughout the 1940s. Glowing orbs in the sky, sudden thunderous concussions, even accounts from villagers of ghostly lights dancing over the mountains at night. Officially, meteorological flares, but unofficially, some whispered of experimental Nazi technology brought to the USSR after the war via Operation Ossoavia, the Soviet counterpart to America's Operation Paperclip. Is it possible that remnants of Nazi wartime science, particularly advanced aviation or weaponry, were being tested in this remote region? The Soviet government had seized scientists, prototypes, even documents from German bunkers. Some of these technologies were years ahead of their time, and some remain beyond comprehension even today. Among the theories, a parachute mine test gone wrong, which could explain the internal injuries without external trauma. But why then was there no official acknowledgement for decades? Why were some records locked away until the fall of the USSR? And then there are the more obscure details. One of the hikers, Yuri Chivanoshenko, had worked at the MAK nuclear facility, itself tied to secret military research. His presence on the expedition has raised eyebrows among investigators who suggest the group may have inadvertently witnessed something they weren't meant to see. Perhaps not a natural force, but a human one born of war, secrecy, and forgotten science. Complicating matters further is the alleged discovery of metallic debris at the site, reported by independent hikers and investigators in the decades since. Pieces said to be oddly shaped, unusually dense, resistant to corrosion. Were they remnants of Soviet experiments? Or something older, something salvaged, adapted, and hidden since the end of the Second World War? In the years after 1945, as both the US and USSR scrambled to harness the spoils of Nazi science, many projects fell into darkness. Files vanished. Scientists disappeared. Ideas once deemed fantasy were tested behind closed doors. Was Dyatlov Pass one such testing ground? Some point to the involvement of Lev Ivanov, the lead Soviet investigator of the Dyatlov case. He would later confess that he was pressured to change his official report, steering attention away from the idea of unidentified flying objects seen near the time of the hikers' deaths. And when asked in later years what he truly believed caused the tragedy, he offered only a cryptic answer. Something not of this world, but not all otherworldly theories imply aliens. What if what happened on that snowy mountainside wasn't from another planet, but from a past we still don't fully understand? The Third Reich had long been obsessed with the occult, with advanced physics, and with weapons that could turn the tide of war. Documents uncovered after the war describe exotic propulsion systems, secret Antarctic bases, and strange bell-shaped devices rumored to manipulate time and space. These ideas, often dismissed as science fiction, were quietly absorbed into Cold War research. So what if Dyatlov Pass was not just a place where hikers met misfortune, but a place where Cold War shadows collided with World War II's final forbidden experiments. What really happened that night in February 1959? Why was the group's tent cut from within? And why did these young men and women run barefoot into the snow? Why were their bodies found scattered? Some horribly injured, others frozen in positions of fear and flight. And perhaps most importantly, what was hidden in the mountains long before they ever arrived? The Urals keep their secrets well, covered in snow, cloaked in time, and muffled by silence. But every so often, a footprint, a torn tent, or a classified file hints that the story isn't over, that somewhere in the ice under the howl of the wind, something waits to be discovered. So we ask again, what really happened at Dyatlov Pass? And how far back does the mystery truly go? The Siberian wilderness stretches endlessly beneath a pale sky, untamed, unbroken, and unforgiving. Among the ancient forests of Krasnokri, the trees whisper with the wind, bowing not to man, but to memory. And in one remote corner of this vast, silent landscape lies a scar older than most can recall. Etched not by time, but by an explosion so powerful it flattened over 800 square miles of taiga. This is Tunguska. The morning of June 30th, 1908 began like any other for the Aveni people and Russian settlers near the Podkamaya Tunguska River. But just after 7 a.m., the sky cracked open. Witnesses described a pillar of fire, a blinding flash followed by a shockwave that sent people flying and shattered windows hundreds of kilometers away. The blast's force was estimated to be 1,000 times stronger than the Hiroshima bomb, and yet there was no crater, no impact site, no conclusive evidence of what had fallen from the sky. At first glance, it seems to predate World War II by decades, and in many ways it does. But what if Tunguska is not merely a strange footnote of pre-war history, but a hidden prelude to it? Decades later, in the shadow of another global conflict, the mystery resurfaced during World War II. Interest in unexplained energy sources and catastrophic forces intensified, not just in the scientific community, but within the secret circles of the Third Reich. Nazi research groups, particularly the Ananba, studied arcane texts, ancient catastrophes, and lost technologies with a fixation bordering on obsession. Among the documents retrieved after the war were classified memos referencing the Tunguska event, not as a natural phenomenon but as something artificial, something replicable. Why would a wartime regime obsessed with wonder weapons study a remote explosion from 1908? This question takes us deeper into the so-called Tunguska theory. The idea that the event was not caused by a meteor as commonly believed, but by an experiment, a weapon, or perhaps something far stranger. Some suggest Nikola Tesla, who at the time was developing his theories of wireless energy transmission, may have accidentally triggered the blast while testing his Warden Cliff Tower. Others speculate Soviet physicists under Stalin, in the years preceding WWII, tried to recreate Tunguska's energy signature, fearing that the Nazis were close to understanding it. But what if the Tunguska blast wasn't of human origin at all? Some researchers propose that the 1908 explosion may have been extraterrestrial in nature, not a meteorite, but something intelligently controlled, a malfunctioning craft, a test gone awry. The lack of debris, the absence of a crater, and the pattern of fallen trees radiating outward like a vast symmetrical fingerprint continued to defy conventional explanation. During the war, reports emerged from German-occupied regions of unusual scientific missions seemingly disconnected from the war effort. Teams dispatched not to battlefronts, but to remote wildernesses, Siberia, the Arctic, the Himalayas. What were they searching for? Declassified files from both Allied and Soviet sources reference a covert Nazi operation dubbed Kronos, a name associated with time or perhaps power beyond human comprehension. Some theorists believe the operation was linked to ancient impact sites and unexplained geological scars like Tunguska. Were the Nazis searching for a source of limitless energy, a key to another dimension, or simply a weapon so powerful it could end the war in an instant? And if Tunguska was a natural event, why then did interest in it peak precisely during the global arms race? Why did documents related to the event vanish into classified military archives in both the USSR and the West? In 1945, as the world tried to piece itself back together, teams were once again sent to the Tunguska region, this time by Soviet scientists under the guise of geological research. Yet, some eyewitnesses described strange instruments, Geiger counters, and silent guards.
What were they measuring?
What were they hoping to find? Even today, expeditions to the Tunguska site report anomalous magnetic fields, strange soil chemistry, and lingering radiation levels that don't align with a mere asteroid. Some trees in the area appear to have grown at accelerated rates after the blast,
as if exposed to an unknown form of energy.
Could the Tunguska event be connected to the wider mystery of WWII's secret science? And if so, how close did humanity come to rediscovering something ancient, powerful, and potentially uncontrollable? In the icy expanse of Siberia, the land holds tight to its secrets. Snow falls gently on twisted trunks and scorched earth. The echoes of that violent morning in 1908 may be long faded, but the questions remain. Were we witnesses to a cosmic accident? Or was it the first ripple in a hidden current that would surge through the wars, conspiracies, and technological leaps of the 20th century? And perhaps most haunting of all, was Tunguska the end of something or the